Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Marcus Tundra, and I've been a park ranger in Alaska for 16 years. Most people think my job is just checking permits and giving directions to tourists, but they're wrong, way wrong. I work the remote sectors of Denali, places where there are no roads for 200 miles in any direction. Places where, if something goes wrong, you better know how to fix it yourself, because help isn't coming anytime soon. My grandfather was Inupiat, and he taught me the old ways alongside the new ranger training. Said I'd need both to survive out here. I thought he was just being dramatic. I was wrong about that too. It was late October, 1982, and the first real freeze had hit hard. 30 below, with wind that cut through your jacket like it wasn't even there. I was stationed at Cache Point, a tiny outpost near the McKinley River. Just me, my radio, and enough supplies to last 3 weeks until the next supply drop. The radio had been acting up for days. Static mostly, sometimes picking up voices speaking languages I didn't recognize. I figured it was just atmospheric interference. Happens a lot during the cold snaps. That morning, I got a call from headquarters. A geological survey team had gone missing. 5 researchers from the University of Alaska, studying permafrost changes. Their last check-in was 3 days ago from Grid Section 7, about 8 miles north of my station. Probably just equipment failure, dispatch told me. Radio's been spotty all week, but we need you to check it out. Standard procedure. I loaded up my snowmobile with emergency gear and headed north. The landscape looked normal enough, endless white broken only by the dark spears of spruce trees. But something felt off. The birds were gone. Completely gone. In 16 years, I'd never seen the forest this quiet. Their camp wasn't hard to find. The bright orange tents stood out against the snow like warning flags. But when I got closer, my stomach dropped. The tents were still up, supplies were scattered around, but there were no people, no footprints leading away. It was like they'd just vanished into thin air. The drilling equipment was still running. That's what really got me. A big diesel generator humming away, the drill core spinning slowly in its mount. Nobody shuts off a drill and leaves it running. That's basic safety. These were professionals. I walked around the camp, calling their names. "Hello, Dr. Peterson. Anyone there?" My voice echoed off the trees and died. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. The drill cores were scattered in a weird pattern around the main tent. Perfect circles, like someone had arranged them on purpose. Each core showed the same thing, layers of permafrost going down 20, 30 feet. Normal stuff. But the bottom sections were different, darker. And when I touched one, it felt warm. That should have been impossible. It was 30 below zero. Permafrost doesn't feel warm. Ever. I tried the radio in their communication tent. Nothing but static. Then, for just a second, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A voice, speaking English, saying my name. Marcus. Faint, like it was coming from very far away, but clear enough that I knew I wasn't imagining it. I keyed the radio. "This is Ranger Tundra. Who is this? Are you with the research team?" Static. Then nothing. My grandfather always said the ice in Alaska was alive. Not in any scientific way. He meant something deeper, something old. He told stories about things that slept under the permafrost, things that woke up when people dug too deep. I'd always figured those were just stories to keep kids from wandering off. But standing there in that empty camp, with warm permafrost cores and voices on dead radios, I started to wonder if maybe he'd been trying to warn me. I spent 2 hours searching the area around the camp. The researchers' personal gear was still in the tents. Wallets, family photos, even medications. Nobody leaves that stuff behind voluntarily. But there were no signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away from the site. What I did find was worse than any evidence of violence. About 50 yards from the main camp, I discovered something that shouldn't exist. A hole in the ground, perfectly round, about 6 feet across. The edges were smooth like glass, and when I shined my flashlight down, I couldn't see the bottom. The weird part was the ice around the hole. It was forming patterns, geometric shapes that looked almost like writing. I'd seen ice formations before. Wind and temperature create all kinds of strange shapes, but this was different. The patterns were too regular, too intentional, and they were growing while I watched. I could actually see new ice forming, crawling across the ground in straight lines and sharp angles. I radioed headquarters. "This is Tundra. I found the research site. We have a problem. Copy that, Marcus. What's your status?" "The team is missing. All their equipment is here, but no people. And there's something else. The permafrost is showing unusual activity. I need backup out here. Backup is 8 hours away minimum. Weather's moving in from the west. Can you secure the site until morning?" 8 hours. In normal circumstances, that would be fine. But these weren't normal circumstances. The ice around the hole was spreading, and I could swear I heard sounds coming from underground. Scraping sounds, like something large moving through frozen earth. "I'll do what I can," I said. That's when I saw her. Dr. Sarah Peterson, the team leader, was standing at the edge of the tree line, just standing there, motionless, about 100 yards away. I called out to her, but she didn't respond, didn't even turn around. I started walking toward her, relieved to finally find one of the missing researchers. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. She was wearing her winter gear, but her hood was down and she wasn't wearing gloves. In 30 below weather, that meant frostbite within minutes. "Dr. Peterson, are you all right?" She turned around slowly, and I saw why she wasn't responding. Her eyes were solid white, not the white of snow blindness. This was different, like cataracts, but covering her entire eyes. And her skin had a blue tint that meant severe hypothermia. She should have been unconscious or dead, but she was standing upright, looking right at me with those horrible white eyes. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was the one I'd heard on the radio. "You need to stop digging." Then she smiled, and I saw that her teeth were covered in ice. Not just frost, actual ice, like her mouth was full of frozen water. I took a step back, my hand moving to the flare gun on my belt. "Dr. Peterson, you need medical attention. Let me help you back to camp." She tilted, her head like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. "The sleepers are waking up. They don't like being disturbed." "Who are the sleepers? Where's the rest of your team?" "They're joining them, one by one. It's warm down there, Marcus. No more cold. No more pain." She started walking toward me, and I could see her breath coming out in huge clouds of steam. But the weird thing was, it wasn't going up like normal breath in cold air. It was flowing downward, hugging the ground like fog. "Stay back," I said, pulling out the flare gun. "I'm warning you." She laughed, and the sound was like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "You can't hurt the ice, Marcus. The ice is forever." That's when the ground under my feet started to feel soft. Not melting, soft. Like the permafrost was turning into mud, even though the temperature hadn't changed. I looked down and saw that the geometric patterns were spreading toward me, ice forming in those same impossible designs all around my boots. I fired the flare into the air and ran back toward the camp. Behind me, I could hear Dr. Peterson laughing, but the sound was getting fainter, like she was sinking into the ground. The flare lit up the whole area for a few seconds, and in that red light I saw them. The other 4 researchers, they were scattered around the big hole, each one standing perfectly still, all with the same white eyes and blue skin. And they were all looking at me. I reached the camp and grabbed my radio. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Ranger Tundra at Grid Section 7. I need immediate extraction. The research team is alive, but something's wrong with them. Something's very wrong." The radio crackled, and through the static I heard my own voice saying, "Copy that, Marcus. Help is on the way." But I wasn't talking into the radio. I stared at the radio for a long moment, my hands shaking. The voice had been mine, but I hadn't said those words. On the other end, I could hear headquarters responding to the fake message, calling off the backup I desperately needed. "Negative on the extraction," came the dispatcher's voice. "If the situation is under control, maintain your position until morning." I tried to key the radio again, but it was dead. Completely dead. No static, no power, nothing. The thing had been working fine 5 minutes ago. Outside the tent, I could hear footsteps in the snow. Slow, deliberate steps circling the camp. I grabbed my rifle and peered through the tent flap. The 5 researchers were walking around the perimeter, about 20 feet out. They moved in perfect sync, like they were sharing the same brain. Every few seconds, one of them would stop and look directly at my tent. Those horrible white eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. Then they'd resume walking, keeping that same measured pace. I was trapped. The temperature inside the tent started dropping fast. I could see my breath, and frost was forming on the plays inside of the tent walls. But outside, I could hear the researchers talking in normal voices, like they were having a casual conversation. "The ranger's afraid," said a man's voice. "Dr. Hayes," I thought. "Fear makes the transition easier," replied Dr. Peterson. "Less resistance. Should we take him now?" "Not yet. Let him understand first. Let him see what we're offering." A woman's voice I didn't recognize said, "The sleepers are hungry. They've been waiting so long." I checked my ammunition. 12 rounds in the rifle, plus a box of 20 in my pack. Not that I thought bullets would help against whatever these people had become. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched out for several minutes. I was starting to think they'd left when I heard a scratching sound. Something was clawing at the side of the tent, slowly, deliberately, like fingernails dragging across the fabric. Then Dr. Peterson's voice, right next to my ear through the tent wall. "We know. You're listening, Marcus. We know you can hear us." I jerked away from the sound, but her voice followed me. "Your grandfather told you stories, didn't he? About the things that sleep under the ice?" How could she know about my grandfather? He was right to be afraid, but he was wrong about one thing. We're not evil, Marcus. We're preservation. We're forever. The cold can't hurt us anymore. Nothing can hurt us. The scratching sound moved around the tent. Now it was coming from 3 different directions. "Look outside, Marcus. See what we've become." Against every instinct I had, I lifted the tent flap just a crack. Dr. Peterson was crouched right outside, her face inches from mine. But it wasn't her face anymore. The skin had turned completely blue-white, like ice, and those milky eyes had no pupils at all. Frost covered her hair and eyebrows, and when she smiled, I could see that her teeth weren't just covered in ice. They were made of ice. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. "No more pain, no more fear. Just the cold embrace of forever." I dropped the tent flap and scrambled backward. But she kept talking. "We can smell your grandfather's blood in you, Marcus. You understand the old ways. The ice has been calling to your family for generations." That's when I remembered the stories. Not just the ones about things sleeping under the ice, but the older ones. The ones about the keepers, people who were chosen to guard the boundaries between our world and whatever lived in the deep cold. My grandfather hadn't just been telling me stories. He'd been preparing me. The scratching stopped, and I heard all 5 of them moving away from the tent. A few minutes later, the temperature started returning to normal. I waited until I was sure they were gone, then grabbed my emergency beacon and activated it. The device would send a distress signal to a satellite, bypassing the radio completely. But when I looked at the display, it showed an error message. "No signal detected." That should have been impossible. These beacons worked anywhere on Earth. I was starting to understand what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about 5 missing researchers. Something much bigger was happening here. Something that had been waiting under the permafrost for a very long time, and the drilling had woken it up. Outside, I could hear them digging, the sound of shovels biting into frozen earth, working with inhuman speed and strength. They were making the hole bigger, and with each shovelful of earth they moved, I could feel something vast and patient stirring far below. Something that had been dreaming in the ice for thousands of years, something that was finally ready to wake up. Dawn came with no sunrise. The sky turned gray instead of light, and a fog rolled in that seemed to come from underground instead of the sky. I could still hear the digging, but now it sounded like dozens of voices, instead of just 5. I had to see what they were doing. I packed my rifle and emergency gear, then crept out of the tent. The fog was thick enough that I could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but I could follow the sound of digging toward the hole. What I found made me understand why my grandfather had been so afraid. The hole was now 50 feet across and perfectly circular. The researchers were down inside it, But they weren't alone. There were others with them, people in old-fashioned clothes, some in military uniforms from different eras, others in gear I didn't recognize. All of them had the same blue-white skin and milky eyes. And they were all digging deeper. Dr. Peterson saw me first. She climbed out of the hole with movements that were too smooth, too fluid, like she was floating instead of climbing. "You came to watch," she said. "Good. You need to understand before you join us." "Join you in what?" "In preservation, in forever," she gestured toward the hole. "Look deeper, Marcus. See what we're freeing." I moved closer to the edge and looked down. Past the diggers, past the pile of excavated permafrost, I could see something that made my mind struggle to process what I was seeing. It was huge, maybe 100 feet across, buried deep in the ice. At first I thought it was some kind of building or machine, but then I realized it was alive, or had been alive. The surface was smooth and black, and it pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm like a massive heart. "What is that thing?" "The sleeper. The first one. It's been dreaming under the ice since before your people walked this land, dreaming of the day it would wake up and make everything cold, everything perfect." The thing in the ice pulsed again, and I felt an answering pulse in my own chest, like it was trying to synchronize with my heartbeat. "It collects us, Doctor," Peterson continued. "Everyone who gets too close. We become part of its dream, and, in return, we become eternal. No more pain, no more loss, no more death." "You're not eternal," I said. "You're dead. That thing killed you." She laughed, and this time the sound was like wind through ice caves. "Death? Marcus, I haven't felt this alive in years. The cold burns away everything weak, everything human. What's left is pure." More people were climbing out of the hole now. I recognized some of them from old missing person reports I'd filed over the years. Hikers, researchers, hunters who'd vanished without a trace. They'd all been collected, turned into servants of whatever was sleeping down there. "Your grandfather knew," Dr. Peterson said. "He was a keeper. His job was to watch for signs that the sleeper was stirring, to make sure nobody dug too deep. And now? Now you get to choose. Join us willingly, and the transition is easy. Fight us, and we'll take you anyway, but it will hurt." The fog was getting thicker, and I could feel the temperature dropping again. But more importantly, I could feel something else, a pulling sensation, like the thing in the ice was trying to draw me closer. I thought about my grandfather's stories, about the old ways, about fire ceremonies and heated metal and the power of warmth against the eternal cold. I pulled out my emergency flare gun and fired it directly into the hole. The reaction was immediate. All the collected people screamed at once, not in pain, but in rage. The thing in the ice pulsed faster, and the hole began filling with a black liquid that steamed in the cold air. "You can't stop it." "Doctor," Peterson snarled, and for the first time since I'd found her, she looked fully human. Angry, desperate. "It's too big, too old." I pulled out my second flare and lit it manually, holding the burning magnesium like a torch. The collected people backed away from the light and heat, their ice-blue skin actually steaming. "Maybe I can't stop it," I said, "but I can make it go, back to sleep." I jumped into the hole. The heat from the flare burned through the black liquid like acid. Everywhere the light touched, the ice cracked and retreated. I could hear the thing at the bottom of the hole making sounds like a whale song, but deeper, sadder, like it was disappointed. The collected people were screaming, but their voices were getting fainter. As the ice around the sleeper cracked and reformed, their connection to it was breaking. Some of them collapsed. Others just stood there looking confused, like they were waking up from a long dream. I reached the bottom of the hole and pressed the burning flare against the black surface of the creature. The reaction was like touching a live electrical wire. Power flowed through me. Images and sensations from thousands of years of hibernation. I saw the sleeper's dreams, a world covered in ice, where nothing changed, nothing died, nothing lived. Perfect preservation for all eternity. But I also felt its weakness. Fire, heat, life, everything warm and changing and human was poison to it. The flare burned out, but the damage was done. The creature's surface was cracking like old ice, and the black liquid was draining away. All around me, The ice walls were reforming, sealing the hole. I climbed out just as the ground collapsed, filling in the excavation site completely. Within minutes, it looked like nothing had ever been disturbed. The fog was lifting, and the collected people were gone. Not dead, just gone. Returned to wherever they'd been before the sleeper called them. Dr. Peterson was the last to disappear. As she faded, she looked at me with eyes that were brown again, human again. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she was gone, and I was alone with my radio crackling back to life. The official report listed it as equipment failure and hypothermia exposure. 5 researchers dead, bodies never recovered, presumed lost in a sudden storm that came up while they were working. The drill site was marked as geologically unstable and permanently closed to further excavation. I never mentioned the sleeper or the collected people or the hole that filled itself in. Who would believe me? But I kept the job. 16 years became 20, then 25. I moved to different sectors, always the remote ones, always the places where drill teams and research groups wanted to dig deep into the permafrost. My grandfather had been a keeper, and now I was too. I learned to recognize the signs. Temperature inversions that didn't make sense. Ice formations that grew too fast or in impossible patterns. Animals avoiding certain areas for no reason. And always, the dreams. The sleeper wasn't the only one. There are others, scattered across Alaska, buried deep in the permafrost. Most of them are still sleeping, but climate change is warming the ground, and drilling operations are going deeper every year. Sometimes I have to intervene. A sudden equipment failure here, a safety violation there. A research permit gets delayed or denied. A drill site gets closed for environmental concerns. I've gotten good at it over the years, but lately the dreams have been stronger, more frequent, and the temperature readings I take in the deep permafrost show warming trends that don't match the official climate data. Something's changing down there. The sleepers are stirring, and I'm getting older. My hands shake more than they used to, and sometimes I forget things that I shouldn't forget. I've started keeping detailed records, hidden in a safety deposit box in Fairbanks, maps of sites that should never be disturbed, temperature logs that show the real story, instructions for the next person who might need to become a keeper. Because one day, someone is going to dig in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the things sleeping under the ice are going to wake up permanently. When that happens, I hope whoever finds my records understands what they're really dealing with. The permafrost keepers aren't just park rangers. We're the last line of defense between the world of the living and the world of eternal cold. And we're running out of time. My name is Marcus Tundra, and this is my warning to whoever comes next. Some things should stay buried. Some dreams should never wake up. The ice remembers everything, and it's always listening. My name is Catherine Frost, and I've been studying caribou in the Arctic for 9 years. People think I'm crazy for living alone out here, but they don't understand. The Arctic isn't empty. It's full of life, patterns, and secrets that most people never see. I have a small research station near the Beaufort Sea, about 400 miles from the nearest town. It's December now, and the sun hasn't shown its face in weeks. The temperature outside is 45 below zero, not counting the wind that cuts through your clothes like knives. My job is simple. I track caribou herds, study where they go, and try to understand why they move the way they do. I have a PhD in Arctic biology, which sounds fancy, but really it just means I know a lot about animals that most people will never see. I put radio collars on some caribou, then follow their signals on my computer. It's peaceful work, most of the time. I chose this life after my divorce, 3 years ago. My ex-husband said I loved the wilderness more than him. Maybe he was right. Out here, things make sense. Animals follow patterns. They eat, sleep, migrate, and have babies. It's honest in a way that people aren't. My station is just a metal building with thick walls and a generator that runs on propane. I have a satellite phone that works when the weather is good, and a supply plane comes once a month if I'm lucky. Sometimes the weather keeps them away for 2 months. I don't mind. I have enough food and fuel to last. I've been alone here for 3 months now. The last supply drop was in October, before the really bad weather hit. My nearest neighbor is a weather station 90 miles south, but I haven't talked to them in weeks. The radio has been acting strange lately, picking up signals that don't make sense. Every morning, I check my computer for the caribou signals. I have callers on about 30 animals from the main herd. They should be moving south by now, heading to their winter feeding grounds. They've done the same thing for thousands of years. It's what caribou do. But 3 days ago, something changed. The signals showed the entire herd turning north. Not just a few animals, but all 8,000 of them. They were heading toward the frozen sea, where there's no food and no shelter. Caribou aren't stupid. They don't just decide to walk into a place that will kill them. I checked my equipment twice. The GPS was working fine. The weather satellite showed clear skies. No storms, no unusual pressure changes. Nothing that would make the animals panic. I've never seen anything like it in 9 years of research. Yesterday morning, I put on my warmest clothes and went outside to look through my binoculars. The aurora was dancing across the sky, which isn't unusual in December, but something about it seemed different. The lights were brighter than normal, and they moved in patterns I'd never seen before. I went back inside and made some hot coffee, trying to figure out what was happening. I've studied animal behavior my whole career. I know that caribou sometimes change their routes because of predators or weather. But 8,000 animals don't just turn around overnight for no reason. The radio crackled to life while I was drinking my coffee. But instead of the weather station, I heard something that made my blood go cold. It sounded like whale songs. Deep, haunting calls that lasted for minutes. But the nearest ocean was 200 miles away, and it was frozen solid. I turned up the volume and listened carefully. The sounds were definitely coming through the radio, not from outside. They seemed to be calling to each other, like a conversation I couldn't understand. Then the signals stopped, and the radio went back to static. I looked at my computer screen. The caribou were still moving north, but now their signals were coming from impossible places. Some showed coordinates that put them in the middle of the frozen sea. Others showed them hundreds of feet in the air. That's when I started to think that something was very, very wrong. I spent the rest of yesterday checking and double-checking my equipment. The radio collars couldn't be broken. They're built to last for years in the worst weather. The GPS satellites were working fine. My computer showed no errors, but the signals kept coming from impossible places. This morning, I decided to investigate. I loaded my snowmobile with emergency supplies and headed north, following the strongest signal. It was coming from about 10 miles away, near a small ridge that overlooked the frozen sea. The ride took me 2 hours through deep snow and bitter wind. My face mask froze to my skin, and my fingers went numb even inside thick gloves. But I've made this trip before. I know how to survive out here. When I reached the ridge, I saw something that changed everything. The entire caribou herd was there, all 8,000 animals. They stood perfectly still in the snow, arranged in perfect circles, like someone had drawn them with a compass. Caribou don't do that. They bunch together for warmth, or spread out to find food. They don't make geometric patterns. I turned off the snowmobile and watched through my binoculars. The animals weren't moving at all. They just stood there, facing the same direction, looking up at the sky. Their breath made clouds in the cold air, but they made no sound. Above them, the aurora danced in broad daylight. I'd never seen the northern lights during the day before. They shouldn't be visible when there's any sunlight at all. But here they were, green and blue curtains of light moving across the sky. I took out my radio and tried to call the weather station. Weather Station 7, this is Arctic Research Station 12. Do you copy? Static answered me for a long moment. Then a voice came through, but it wasn't the radio operator I knew. We see you, Catherine. The voice was calm and friendly, but I didn't recognize it. More importantly, I hadn't told them my name. Who is this? I asked. How do you know my name? We know many things about you. Your work with the caribou, your studies of migration patterns, your dedication to understanding the natural world. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Identify yourself. What's your call sign? We don't use call signs, Catherine. We're not from your radio stations. I looked up at the aurora, and for just a moment, I could swear it was pulsing in time with the voice on the radio. What do you want? I asked. We want to help. The caribou are safe with us. They understand their new purpose. I looked back at the herd through my binoculars. They still hadn't moved. It was like watching 8,000 statues made of fur and bone. What purpose? What are you talking about? The same purpose you'll understand soon, Catherine. The gathering has begun. The radio went dead. I tried calling again, but got only static. I checked the battery and the antenna. Everything was working perfectly, but no one answered my calls. I decided to get closer to the caribou. Something was wrong with them, and I needed to understand what. I started the snowmobile and drove slowly down the ridge, trying not to spook the animals. As I got closer, I realized they weren't just standing still. They were frozen, not from cold, but like time had stopped for them. Their eyes were open and aware, but they couldn't move. I stopped about 50 feet away and got off the snowmobile. The aurora above us was getting brighter, even though it was the middle of the day. The lights were so intense now that they cast shadows on the snow. That's when I noticed the wolves. A pack of about 12 Arctic wolves stood in their own perfect circle, just outside the caribou herd. In nature, wolves would be hunting the caribou, picking off the weak and old. But these wolves were just as frozen as their prey, staring up at the lights with the same empty expression. I took a step closer, and one of the caribou turned its head to look at me. Its eyes were normal, but there was something else behind them. Intelligence that seemed too deep, too aware. It was looking at me like it knew exactly who I was and what I was thinking. Then it spoke, not with its mouth, but inside my head. A voice that was definitely not human, but somehow familiar. "Join us, Catherine. The lights are calling." I stumbled backward and fell in the snow. Caribou can't talk, and they definitely can't project thoughts into human minds. But I heard it as clearly as if someone had whispered in my ear. All around me, the animals began turning their heads to look at me. 8,000 caribou and 12 wolves, all staring at me with those two aware eyes. The aurora above us pulsed brighter, and I felt something pulling at my mind. A gentle pressure, like someone trying to open a door in my thoughts. It felt warm and welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. "Come with us," the voices said, all the animals speaking as one inside my head. "You don't need to study us anymore. You can become one of us." I forced myself to stand up and back away toward my snowmobile. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't natural. It wasn't right. As I reached for the handlebars, the aurora suddenly dropped down from the sky. A column of green light touched the ground right in the middle of the caribou herd. And one by one, the animals began walking into the light and disappearing. I watched in horror as the caribou walked calmly into the column of light and vanished. Not like they were being killed or transported somewhere else. They just stopped existing, as if they'd never been there at all. The light was solid somehow. I could see it had texture, like flowing water made of electricity, and it was warm. Even from 50 feet away, I could feel heat coming from it, which should have been impossible in -45-degree weather. I jumped on my snowmobile and started the engine, desperate to get away. But as I turned to leave, I saw more columns of light dropping from the aurora all across the horizon. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered across the frozen landscape like glowing pillars holding up the sky. The ride back to my station was the longest 2 hours of my life. Every few minutes, I saw another light column in the distance, always with animals walking toward it. Not just caribou, but Arctic foxes, polar bears, even birds flying directly into the lights and disappearing. When I finally reached my station, I locked the door and tried to radio for help. The satellite phone wouldn't work. Neither would my emergency radio. Every frequency just gave me static, except for one. The same calm voice from before. "Catherine, there's no need to run. We're not here to hurt you." "What are you?" I demanded. "What's happening to the animals?" "We're shepherds, Catherine. We gather the flocks when it's time to move them to safety." "Safety from what? From what's coming to your world?" "Your planet is dying, Catherine. The ice is melting. The animals you love so much will all be dead within 50 years. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Climate change was real. I'd seen the effects in my 9 years of research. Shorter winters, thinner ice, changes in migration patterns as animals struggled to adapt. "That doesn't give you the right to steal them," I said. "We're not stealing. We're saving. In our realm, they'll live forever. No hunger, no cold, no predators, just peace." "Your realm?" The lights on my instruments began flickering in patterns that looked almost like language. Then my computer screen changed, showing me something impossible. It was a view of Earth from space, but not the Earth I knew. This one was green and lush, with vast forests where the Arctic should be. Herds of animals grazed in meadows under a warm sun. There were caribou there, but also mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and other creatures that had been extinct for thousands of years. "This is where we take them," the voice said. "A world where extinction is impossible, where every species that ever lived still thrives." "That's not real," I whispered. "It's more real than your dying planet, Catherine. And there's a place there for you too. We've been watching you for years. Your dedication to protecting these animals, your willingness to sacrifice comfort and human companionship for the sake of knowledge. You're exactly what we need." The screen changed again, showing me a woman who looked like me, but different. She was wearing clothes made of some kind of glowing material, and she was surrounded by animals that seemed to love her. She looked happy in a way I'd never been, even before my divorce. "That could be you," the voice said. "Our liaison to the animal kingdom, helping us gather the creatures that need saving before it's too late." I stared at the screen, and for a moment, I wanted it to be true. The loneliness of the past 3 years hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time I'd had a real conversation with another human being? When was the last time I'd felt like I belonged somewhere? "All you have to do is step outside," the voice continued. "We'll send a light for you. No more cold, no more isolation, no more watching the animals you love disappear one by one." My hand was on the door handle before I realized what I was doing. The offer was so tempting, a world where I could do my work forever, where the animals would never be in danger. Then I heard scratching at my window. I looked outside and saw an Arctic fox sitting in the snow, looking at me with those same too-aware eyes. But this fox was different. It was translucent, like a ghost, and its eyes glowed with the same green light as the aurora. "Help me," it said inside my mind. But this voice was different from the shepherd's. It was weak, frightened, desperate. "I want to go home. I want to be real again." The fox pressed its ghostly paw against the glass. "They say we'll live forever, but we're not really alive. We're just echoes, shadows of what we used to be." More animals appeared around my station. Caribou, wolves, bears, all of them glowing with that eerie light. All of them pressing against my windows, their eyes pleading. "Don't let them take you," the fox begged. "Don't become like us." The calm voice on the radio changed, becoming harder, more urgent. "Don't listen to them, Catherine. They're confused. They don't understand yet how much better their new existence is." But I was looking into the fox's eyes, and I saw the truth there. These weren't saved animals. They were prisoners, trapped in some kind of half-life between worlds. "How many?" I asked the fox. "How many animals have they taken?" "Thousands," it whispered. "Every extinction you've ever studied. We're all there, in the in-between place, and once you cross over, you can never come back." The aurora above my station suddenly flared brighter, and I felt that pulling sensation in my mind again. But now it felt different, not welcoming, but hungry, like something trying to drag me away from everything I'd ever known. I ran to my emergency supplies and pulled out a flare gun. If these things were made of light, maybe bright light would hurt them. The shepherd's voice came through the radio one more time, and now it didn't sound calm at all. It sounded angry. "You cannot resist us forever, Catherine. Every animal on this continent will be ours by dawn, and you will be too." Outside, the ghostly animals were fading away, but their voices echoed in my mind. "Run, Catherine. Hide. Don't let them make you into what we've become." The aurora was descending toward my station, and I could feel its heat through the metal walls. I had maybe minutes before they reached me. I grabbed my research equipment and ran to the metal frame of my station's communication tower. 9 years of Arctic research had taught me a few things about electromagnetic fields and radio interference. If these shepherds were using the aurora to travel between dimensions, they were probably vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses. The aurora column was only 100 feet away now, moving slowly but steadily toward my station. Through its glowing wall, I could see shapes moving. Not animals this time, but tall figures that looked almost human, except they were made of the same flowing light as the aurora itself. "Catherine Frost?" One of them called, its voice echoing both through the radio and in my mind. We've traveled very far to find someone like you. Your knowledge of animal behavior, your dedication to their welfare, makes you perfect for our needs. What exactly do you need? I asked, connecting my emergency radio to the metal tower frame. A shepherd for Earth's creatures. Someone who understands them, who can help us gather them efficiently before your world becomes uninhabitable. The lead figure stepped out of the light column, and I could see it clearly for the first time. It was humanoid but stretched too tall, with limbs that bent in ways that human joints couldn't. Its face was kind, almost maternal, but its eyes were the same glowing green as the aurora. We've done this before, Catherine. Thousands of worlds, millions of species saved from extinction. You would be helping us preserve the most beautiful creatures your planet has ever produced. As prisoners, I said, thinking of the fox's desperate plea. As treasures, protected forever from the chaos and destruction that your species brings to everything it touches. I looked at my equipment. The radio was connected to the tower now, a long dot, with my computer and GPS unit. If I could create a big enough electromagnetic pulse, it might disrupt whatever technology they were using to cross dimensions. Show me, I said, stalling for time. Show me this paradise you're talking about. The shepherd raised one impossibly long arm, and suddenly I was seeing through its eyes into another realm entirely. It was beautiful, I had to admit. Rolling grasslands under a gentle sun, with herds of every animal I'd ever studied running free and healthy. Mammoths grazed next to modern elephants. Saber-toothed cats lounged in meadows with house cats and lions. But as I looked closer, I saw what the fox had tried to tell me. The animals were perfect, but they weren't real. They moved like echoes, going through the motions of living without any actual life behind their eyes. They were preserved, like specimens in a museum that could walk around. They're not alive, I whispered. They're more than alive. They're eternal. They're empty. The shepherd's kind expression flickered, and for just a moment, I saw something hungry and cold underneath. You will understand once you cross over. The transition is difficult to explain to those still bound by physical limitations. More shepherds were emerging from the light column now, surrounding my station. I could feel them pressing against my mind, trying to make me walk outside and join them willingly. Last chance, Catherine. Come with us now, and you'll retain more of yourself in the transition. Force us to take you, and you'll lose everything that makes you. To you. I looked at my jury-rigged EMP device. It might work, or it might just electrocute me. But either way was better than becoming a hollow shell like those poor animals. I have a better idea, I said, and fired a flare directly at the main shepherd. The flare passed right through its body of light, but the bright magnesium flame seemed to cause it pain. The creature recoiled, its form flickering like a bad television signal. Interesting, it said, sounding genuinely surprised. You wish to fight? Very well. All the shepherds raised their arms at once, and I felt a crushing pressure in my mind. They were trying to force the transition, to drag my consciousness into their realm whether I wanted to go or not. I activated my makeshift EMP device. The electromagnetic pulse tore through every piece of electronic equipment in my station, including the shepherd's aurora bridge. The light column flickered and destabilized, and the shepherd's forms began to waver. Impossible, the lead shepherd gasped. The bridge is anchored to your planet's magnetic field. You cannot? I fired another flare, then another. The bright lights seemed to interfere with their ability to maintain cohesion in our reality. The animals, I shouted over the crackling of disrupted energy. Send them back. We cannot. They've already been processed. They belong to our realm now. But through the flickering light, I could see the ghostly animals appearing again, looking more solid than before. The EMP was weakening the shepherd's hold on them. I ran outside with my flare gun and started firing at every aurora column I could see on the horizon. Each flare seemed to disrupt the light, causing it to flicker and fade. The lead shepherd appeared in front of me, its form barely stable now. You don't understand what you're doing. Without our protection, these animals will die when your climate changes. You're condemning them to extinction. Maybe, I said, loading my last flare. But at least they'll die as themselves, not as your empty copies. I fired the final flare directly at its chest. The shepherd dissolved with a sound like breaking glass, and all the aurora columns across the landscape began to collapse. As they fell, I could see animals tumbling out of them. Real animals, solid and alive and confused, but free. The ghostly fox materialized next to me, looking solid again for the first time. It looked up at me with normal fox eyes, no longer glowing, and then ran off into the snow like a wild animal should. Within minutes, the aurora was gone, the shepherds were gone, and the Arctic was just the Arctic again. Cold, harsh, and beautifully, perfectly real. That was 6 months ago. Military showed up 3 days later, asking questions about the electromagnetic anomaly their satellites had detected. I told them my equipment had malfunctioned during a solar storm. They seemed satisfied with that explanation, or at least they pretended to be. They transferred me to a desk job in Anchorage 2 weeks later. For my own safety, they said, Arctic research is too dangerous for solo operations. I know better. Someone higher up decided I'd seen too much, learned too much. They want me where they can keep an eye on me. But they can't watch me all the time. I've been monitoring aurora activity across the Arctic Circle, using satellite data and reports from weather stations. The shepherds haven't given up. They're still out there, still looking for ways to cross over into our reality. Last month, there were reports of strange animal behavior in northern Canada. A week ago, reindeer herders in Siberia found their entire herd arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Just like I saw that day, the shepherds are learning from their encounter with me. They're being more careful, more subtle. Instead of massive light columns, they're using smaller aurora displays. Instead of taking whole herds at once, they're picking off animals one by one. But I'm learning too. I've been building better EMP devices, portable ones that can disrupt their technology without destroying my own equipment. I've been tracking their patterns, trying to predict where they'll show up next. The animals they sent back are different now. Not in any way that shows up in medical exams or behavioral studies. But I can see it when I look into their eyes. They remember where they were taken. They remember what it felt like to be empty, to be just an echo of themselves. And sometimes, late at night, I can hear them calling to me. Not in words, but in something deeper. A shared understanding between species that we're all in this together, all fighting to stay real and alive and free. The shepherds think they're saving us from extinction. They don't understand that being preserved as a copy isn't the same as being alive, that the struggle to survive, the freedom to fail, is what makes life worth living. My satellite phone rang this morning. When I answered, I heard that familiar calm voice. "Hello, Catherine, we've missed you." "I'm sure you have," I said. "We've been thinking about your objections to our methods. Perhaps we can find a compromise." "I doubt it. What if we only took the animals that were already dying? The old, the dascum, sick, the injured? We could give them perfect health in our realm." For a moment, I almost listened, almost considered it. But then I remembered the fox's eyes, the emptiness behind that false perfection. "No deal," I said. "We will return, Catherine. Perhaps not this year, perhaps not this decade, but we will return. And when we do, we'll be ready for your electromagnetic tricks. And I'll be ready for you." The line went dead, but I know they're still watching, still planning. I keep my equipment ready and my flare gun loaded. Because the next time the aurora dances in patterns it shouldn't, the next time the animals start acting like they're being called by something we can't see, I'll be there. I'm Catherine Frost. I study animals in the Arctic. And I've learned that sometimes protecting the things you love means being willing to let them face danger rather than forcing them into a cage, even a perfect one. The aurora is beautiful, but it's not always natural. And some things that call themselves shepherds are really just thieves with good intentions. I'll keep watching the lights, and I'll keep fighting for the right of every living thing to remain truly, imperfectly, gloriously alive, even if it kills me. My name is Robert Standing Bear, and I've been a park ranger in Alaska for 21 years. Most folks think that means I spend my days giving tours and selling postcards. They're wrong. In Kobuk Valley National Park, I'm more like a guardian of secrets that go back thousands of years. I'm 48 now, half Inupiat, half Athabascan. My grandmother used to tell stories about giants who walked this land before humans arrived. I always figured they were just tales meant to keep kids from wandering too far from camp. After Vietnam, I came back home looking for peace. The wilderness gave me that. The quiet helped heal what the war had broken inside me. September in Alaska means winter's coming fast. The days get shorter every week, and the first snow usually hits by the end of the month. This year felt different, though. The caribou migration was late. The birds left early. Even the ground squirrels seemed nervous, chattering more than usual. I was working with Dr. Sarah, Chen's archaeological team that month. They'd gotten permits to survey an old village site near Jade Creek, about 15 miles from the nearest landing strip. The site was special. Carbon dating suggested people had lived there over 15,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest settlements in North America. Dr. Chen was excited about finding tools and pottery pieces. Her team had been digging for 2 weeks when they found something that changed everything. Tommy Nushak, a young guy from Kotzebue, working as their local guide, came running to my cabin that Tuesday morning. "Robert, you need to see this," he said, breathing hard. "They found something in the permafrost, something big." I grabbed my jacket and followed him to the dig site. The team had set up their equipment in a valley protected from the wind, where ancient people once built their homes. Dr. Chen stood next to a square hole they'd dug, staring down at something. When she looked up at me, her face was pale. "Robert, I need you to tell me if this is some kind of joke," she said. I walked over and looked down. In the frozen ground, clear as day, was a human footprint. But it was huge, easily 2 feet long and a foot wide. The detail was perfect. You could see the arch, the toes, even what looked like calluses. It was definitely human, but no human I'd ever known. "How old?" I asked. "The permafrost layer suggests 15,000 years, Dr. Chen said quietly. "But that's impossible. Humans that big have never existed." I knelt down and measured it with my hands. My boot was size 11. This print was twice as long. I felt something cold run down my back that had nothing to do with the weather. "There's more," Tommy said. "A whole trail of them leading toward the old village site." That's when I should have called this in to headquarters, should have told them to stop digging and wait for more experts. But I was curious. And curiosity is a dangerous thing in Alaska. The wind picked up as we stood there, carrying a smell I didn't recognize. Not quite animal, not quite human. Something old. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 5 minutes, which was strange even for September. "We're going to follow the trail," Dr. Chen announced. I looked at the darkening sky and felt my grandmother's stories whisper in the back of my mind. The giants who walked before humans. The first people, tall as trees, strong as bears. "Maybe we should wait until tomorrow," I suggested. "Weather's changing fast." But Dr. Chen was already packing her equipment. Her 3 team members, Dr. Martinez, Janet, and Paul, were loading their packs with cameras and measuring tools. Tommy looked nervous but didn't say anything. As we prepared to follow that impossible trail, I noticed something else. The regular animal tracks around the dig site, ptarmigan, Arctic fox, even caribou prints, all led away from the area. Like they were running from something. The footprints headed north toward a rocky ridge where my grandfather once told me ancient ceremonies took place. As we walked, I counted the prints. 18 steps, each one perfectly spaced, each one showing the same impossible size. The fog started rolling in just as we reached the base of the ridge. The fog wasn't normal. In 21 years working these valleys, I'd seen plenty of weather roll in from the coast. This was different. It moved against the wind and seemed to glow with its own light. The temperature kept dropping, and our breath started making thick clouds. "The prints continue up the slope," Dr. Martinez called out, his voice muffled by the strange mist. We climbed for an hour, following the giant tracks carved into rock and frozen soil. Sometimes the prints were so deep they'd collected ice water. Whatever made them had to weigh at least 800 pounds. But the stride length suggested someone tall rather than heavy. "Look at this," Janet said, stopping beside a boulder the size of a pickup truck. The boulder had been moved. Fresh scrape marks showed where it had been dragged 20 feet from its original position. Lichen that had grown on one side was now facing down, and the exposed rock underneath was clean. "How much would this weigh?" Paul asked, running his hands over the stone. 3, maybe 4 tons, I estimated. Takes a bulldozer to move something like this. But there were no machine tracks, just those impossible human footprints leading past the boulder toward the ridgetop. The fog got thicker as we climbed higher. Soon, we could barely see 10 feet ahead. Doctor Chen insisted we stay together and keep following the trail. I was starting to think this was a bad idea, but I didn't want to sound like I was afraid of old stories. Then we heard it. A sound like breathing, but huge. Slow and deep, like air moving through a cave. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Everyone stop," I whispered. We stood perfectly still, listening. The breathing continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. "Wind in the rocks," Dr. Chen said, but her voice shook. "There's no wind," Tommy pointed out. He was right. The fog hung perfectly still around us. Even our breath clouds weren't moving. We kept climbing. The footprints led to a flat area near the ridge top, where someone had arranged stones in a circle. Each stone was perfectly placed, too heavy for a normal person to lift. Inside the circle, the ground was carved with symbols I'd seen in old photographs from archaeological sites across Alaska. "This is incredible, Doctor," Chen breathed, pulling out her camera. These carvings could be as old as the footprints. While she documented the site, I walked around the circle's edge. That's when I found Janet's backpack. "Janet," I called out, "did you drop your pack?" No answer. I looked around the group. Dr. Chen, Dr. Martinez, Paul, Tommy, 4 people. "Where's Janet?" I asked. Everyone looked around. The fog had gotten so thick we hadn't noticed she was missing. "Janet!" Dr. Chen shouted. "Janet!" Her voice echoed off the rocks and disappeared into the mist. We waited for an answer that never came. "She was right behind me when we reached the stone circle," Paul said. "Not even 5 minutes ago." I opened Janet's pack. Everything was still inside: water, food, even her radio. But the radio had been turned off, and the battery was missing. "We need to find her," Dr. Chen said. I looked at the fog, then at the carved symbols in the stone circle. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "The giants don't like being disturbed, Bobby. They protect the old places." That's when we heard Janet scream. It came from somewhere below us, back down the slope. Not a scream of fear, a scream of pain that cut off suddenly, too suddenly. "This way," I said, pulling out my flashlight and heading toward the sound. We stumbled down the slope, calling Janet's name. The fog seemed to move ahead of us, always just thick enough to block our view. After 10 minutes of searching, we found her. Janet was sitting against a tree, perfectly positioned, like she was taking a rest. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead. She didn't respond when we called her name or shook her shoulders. "Janet, can you hear me?" Dr. Chen asked. Janet's lips moved slightly. I leaned closer to hear. "So tall," she whispered. "So very tall." Then she blinked and seemed to wake up. "What happened?" she asked, looking confused. "Why are you all staring at me?" "You disappeared," I told her. "We heard you scream." "I don't remember screaming," Janet said, but her hands were shaking. "I remember following the trail. Then, nothing." "How long was I gone?" 20 minutes, Paul said, checking his watch. Janet looked at her hands. There was dirt under her fingernails that hadn't been there before. Fresh dirt, like she'd been digging. But she was wearing gloves when she disappeared. The fog started to clear as we helped Janet down the mountain. When I looked back at the stone circle, I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a new footprint in the soft ground inside the circle. Fresh, still steaming in the cold air, and it was facing the direction we'd gone. Back at base camp, Janet couldn't remember anything about her missing 20 minutes. "Doctor?" Chen wanted to call for evacuation, but the radio wasn't working. Just static and a low humming sound that made our teeth ache. "Could be solar interference," Paul suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. That night, I stayed awake, listening. The usual sounds of the Alaska wilderness, wind, small animals moving, the distant call of owls, were gone. The silence was so complete it hurt my ears. Around 2 a.m, I heard movement outside my tent. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too slow, too heavy, with too much space between each step. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent flap carefully. In the beam of light, I saw tracks in the fresh snow that had fallen during the evening, the same impossible giant prints leading in a circle around our camp. Whatever had made them had been watching us while we slept. In the morning, Dr. Martinez was missing. We found his sleeping bag torn open from the outside. His boots were still inside the tent, but his clothes were gone. There were no signs of a struggle, and his personal items were arranged in a neat pile beside his sleeping bag. No one just vanishes, Doctor, Chen said, but her voice was getting higher with each word. Tommy found the trail leading away from Dr. Martinez's tent. The giant footprints headed north again, toward the old village site. But these prints were deeper than before, like whatever made them was carrying extra. Wait, we have to follow them, Doctor, Chen insisted. No, I said firmly. We need to get out of here, now. We can't leave without knowing what happened to Martinez. Paul supported Dr. Chen. Janet just stared at the destroyed tent, her face blank. Tommy pulled me aside. My grandmother told the same stories yours did, he whispered. About the giants. She said they took people sometimes, brought them back changed. Changed how? They came back taller, Tommy said, and they forgot how to be human. Despite my protests, we followed the trail. The giant prints led straight to the old village site where the original excavation had started. But something was different. The dig site had been filled in, not just covered over, filled with massive stones that would take heavy equipment to move. The careful archaeological grid that Dr. Chen's team had spent 2 weeks creating was gone. In its place was a mound of rocks arranged in a perfect spiral pattern. This is impossible, Dr. Chen said. Those stones, we'd need a crane to move them. I walked around the mound, counting the stones. 18 of them, just like the 18 giant footprints we'd followed up the ridge. That's when we heard Dr. Martinez calling, "Help me." His voice echoed from somewhere below the rock pile. "I'm trapped down here. Help me." Dr. Chen grabbed a crowbar from her equipment and started trying to move the stones. They wouldn't budge. "Martinez, can you hear me?" she shouted. "Yes," came the reply. "It's dark down here. So dark. And there are others with me." "Others?" "The old ones," Dr. Martinez said. His voice sounded strange, deeper than I remembered. "They've been waiting so long, they want to come back up." Paul and Janet joined Dr. Chen in trying to move the stones. I stood back, watching the tree line. Something was wrong about the way Martinez sounded, like his voice was coming from farther away than it should be. "Tommy," I said quietly, "how deep was this excavation?" 6 feet, maybe 7, at the deepest point. I looked at the mound of stones. It was at least 12 feet high. "Martinez," I called out, "how did you get so far down?" Silence for a long moment. "They carried me," he answered, and now his voice definitely sounded different, older, rougher. "They wanted to show me the deep places, the places where they sleep." "Who carried you?" "The first people," Martinez said. "The tall ones. They're waking up, Robert. All of them." The ground under our feet started to vibrate, just slightly, like something huge was moving deep underground. "We need to leave," I said, "right now." That's when the stones started moving by themselves. The carefully arranged spiral began to rotate, each massive stone sliding into a new position with a grinding sound that made our bones ache. As they moved, gaps appeared between them, and warm air rose from the holes, carrying a smell like old bones and forgotten years. "Martinez!" Dr. Chen shouted into one of the gaps. The answer came from directly behind us. "I'm right here, Sarah." We spun around. Dr. Martinez stood at the edge of the clearing, but he looked wrong. Taller than he had been that morning, his clothes hung loose on his stretched frame, and his eyes reflected light like an animal's. "How did you?" "Doctor?" Chen started to ask. "They taught me," Martinez said, his voice now definitely deeper than before. "They taught me how to walk between the deep places and the high places, how to move through the earth like water." He smiled, and his teeth looked sharper than human teeth should be. "They want to teach all of us." The ground shook harder. More warm air rose from the gaps in the stone spiral. And from somewhere far below, we heard the sound of many voices singing in a language that predated any human tongue. The first people were waking up, and they were hungry for company. Dr. Martinez took a step toward us, and I saw that his feet barely touched the ground. He moved like he was floating, like gravity didn't quite work on him anymore. "Sarah," he said, his voice echoing strangely, "you wanted to understand the old culture. They can show you everything. 15,000 years of knowledge, waiting in the deep places. That's not Martinez, Tommy whispered. Look at his shadow. I looked down. Martinez's shadow was wrong. It stretched too long and seemed to move independently of his body. The giant prints, I said suddenly, understanding flooding through me. You made those prints. Martinez smiled, and when he did, his face looked older. Ancient. When they wake, they need vessels, he explained. Bodies that can walk in both worlds. Doctor. Martinez volunteered, though he doesn't remember choosing. The stone spiral had rotated completely now, and the gaps had aligned into a perfect opening. The singing from below grew, louder, harmonizing in ways that made our ears ring. Tommy, I said quietly, when your grandmother told stories about the giants, how did people protect themselves? Respect, Tommy answered. You had to show proper respect. And, he paused, thinking, blood. You had to prove you belonged to the land, Doctor. Chen was backing away from Martinez slowly. Robert, what's he talking about? The giants aren't monsters, I said, pieces falling together. They're guardians, protectors of the sacred sites. We disturbed their burial ground. Martinez nodded approvingly. The first archaeological team to truly understand. Yes, we protect what must be protected. But you've awakened us too early. The world above isn't ready for our return. Then go back to sleep, I said. We cannot. The barriers have been broken. The deep places have been opened. Martinez gestured toward the spiral of stones. But we can make this right. Join us willingly, and we'll sleep for another 1,000 years. Resist. He shrugged. We'll take what we need anyway. Paul suddenly broke and ran for the tree line. Martinez didn't even turn to watch him go, just raised one hand. Paul stopped mid-stride, frozen in place like a statue. The tall ones are patient, Martinez said, but not infinitely so. From the opening in the stones came the sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps climbing from deep places. The first giant was coming up. I thought about my grandmother's stories, about the ceremonies she'd described for approaching sacred places, about the offerings required to show respect. What do you want? I asked. The excavation must be undone properly, Martinez said. Every artifact returned, every disturbed stone replaced. The site must be blessed according to the old ways. And if we do that, we sleep again. You leave. The secret remains buried. Dr. Chen stepped forward. I can't agree to bury scientific discoveries that could change our understanding of human history. Then you will help us change human history in a different way, Martinez said. The footsteps from below grew louder. Whatever was climbing up was almost at ground level. Tommy, I said urgently, what were the old blessing ceremonies like? Blood offerings. Sacred songs. Acknowledgement of the first people's claim to the land. I pulled out my knife and cut my palm. Blood dripped onto the ground. I acknowledge the first people, I said in the traditional words my grandmother had taught me. I ask permission to walk on sacred ground. I offer my blood to show respect. Martinez tilted his head, listening to something we couldn't hear. They remember you, he said, surprised. Your grandmother performed the proper rites here 70 years ago. You carry her blessing. The footsteps stopped. The singing from below quieted. They will listen to you, Martinez continued. You can speak for your people. I felt the, quote, weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. 4 lives depended on what I said next. I speak for these people, I announced formally. They didn't know the proper ways. They meant no disrespect. We will undo the damage. We will rebury what was taken. We will protect the sacred site. And the knowledge? Martinez asked. The proof of our existence? I looked at Dr. Chen. Her whole career was built on preserving archaeological discoveries. But her life was worth more than her reputation. The knowledge stays buried, I said. Some secrets are too dangerous for the world above. Martinez smiled, and for a moment, he looked almost human again. The first people accept your terms, he said, but the rites must be completed before dawn. The portal must be closed properly. The sun was already setting. We had maybe 10 hours to save ourselves and put ancient guardians back to sleep. The real work was about to begin. We worked through the night by flashlight and moonlight. Dr. Chen and her team gathered every artifact they'd collected, every piece of pottery and stone tool they'd cataloged. Tommy and I performed the blessing ceremonies my grandmother had taught me, singing the old songs while we returned each item to the ground. The giants stayed below, but we could feel them watching. Sometimes the earth would tremble slightly when we placed something in the wrong spot, guiding us to where each artifact belonged. Dr. Martinez helped, though he moved strangely and spoke little. As we worked, he seemed to become more human again, like whatever had possessed him was gradually letting go. "I remember now," he said around midnight, his voice returning to normal. "I was digging, and I found a skull, huge but perfectly human. When I touched it," he shuddered. "I could hear their voices, calling from so far down. They were lonely, Robert, 15,000 years of loneliness." By dawn, we had restored the site as much as possible. The stone spiral had rotated back to its original position, sealing the opening. The giant footprints had filled themselves with blown snow and disappeared. Paul, freed from whatever had frozen him in place, helped carry Dr. Chen's equipment back to base camp. Janet moved normally again, though she claimed she could still hear faint singing when the wind was quiet. "What do we report, Doctor?" Chen asked as we waited for the bush plane to pick us up. "Archaeological survey complete," I said. "Site found to be culturally sensitive and unsuitable for further excavation. Recommend protected status." She nodded slowly. "And the footprints? The evidence?" "What footprints?" I replied. Dr. Chen looked at her team. Dr. Martinez was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Paul and Janet were sharing quiet conversation, both looking relieved to be leaving. Tommy was singing softly in his native language, a song of thanks and farewell. "What footprints, Doctor?" Chen agreed. The plane came at noon. As we loaded our gear, I walked back to the restored site one last time. The ground looked undisturbed, like no one had ever been there. But I could feel them below, the first people, settling back into their ancient sleep. I left a small offering of tobacco and said a final prayer of respect. 20 years later, I'm still the ranger responsible for that valley. The site remains officially protected, though I'm the only one who knows why. Sometimes, on very quiet nights, I hear faint singing carried on the wind. The giants dream, and their dreams keep the old ways alive. Dr. Chen became a leading advocate for protecting indigenous archaeological sites. She never published anything about Kobuk Valley, but her work helped establish new protocols for respecting cultural heritage in archaeological research. Tommy became a traditional cultural teacher, passing on stories that help people understand why some places must remain undisturbed. He never mentions giants in his classes, but he teaches respect for the land and the old knowledge. The others? Dr. Martinez left archaeology and became a counselor for veterans dealing with trauma. Paul switched to teaching high school science. Janet works for the National Park Service now, helping establish cultural protection guidelines. None of them talk about what happened in Kobuk Valley. But sometimes, when we cross paths at conferences or meetings, I catch them listening carefully to the wind, as if expecting to hear ancient voices singing. The first people sleep, but they remember. They remember us, and we remember them. That's how it should be. Some secrets keep themselves, and some guardians never truly rest. My grandmother was right. The old things don't stay buried. They just wait for the right time to remind us that we're not the first people to walk this land. And we won't be the last. My name is Michael Steele, and I've been patrolling Alaska's Dalton Highway for 14 years. People call it the Ice Road, and for good reason. It's 414 miles of frozen hell that runs from Fairbanks all the way up to Deadhorse, cutting right through the Arctic Circle. Most folks have seen it on TV shows about ice road truckers, but let me tell you something. TV doesn't show you the real danger. I'm 39 years old now, been doing this job since I was 25. Before that, I drove trucks myself for 3 years, hauling supplies up to the oil fields. So I know this road from both sides, as a driver and as the guy who keeps drivers safe. In 14 years, I've never had a fatal accident on my watch. Not one. I've pulled 47 people out of broken down trucks, guided convoys through whiteout blizzards, and talked panicked drivers through equipment failures when it was 60 below and their heaters quit working. My job title is Transportation Safety Coordinator, but really I'm just a guardian angel with a snowplow. I drive up and down this road every day, checking ice thickness, monitoring weather conditions, and making sure the truckers don't die out there. Because this road will kill you if you're not careful. It'll kill you even if you are careful. The highway runs through some of the most isolated country on Earth. Emergency stations every 50 miles, no cell phone service, and if your truck breaks down between stations in the middle of winter, you've got maybe 2 hours before the cold kills you. The truckers all know this. They're tough guys, have to be to do this job. But even tough guys get scared when they're alone on the ice road at 3 a.m. and the temperature's dropping. I live in a small cabin about 10 miles south of Coldfoot, which is basically the halfway point. My wife Sarah died in a car accident 4 years ago, so it's just me and my 2 kids now. Emma's 12 and Jake's 9. They live with my mom down in Anchorage during the school year, but they come stay with me during summer break. It gets lonely up here, but this job is all I know. The thing about working on the ice road is that you develop a sixth sense about danger. You can feel when something's wrong before you see it. Maybe it's the way the wind sounds, or how the ice looks different, or the fact that you haven't seen any ravens for the past 10 miles. After 14 years, I can tell you exactly what normal feels like on this road. And in January 1989, nothing felt normal. It started small, like these things always do. Little details that seemed off, but not dangerous. I'd find truck tire tracks that went too far off the main road, way further than any sensible driver would go. Sometimes I'd see footprints in the snow that didn't lead anywhere, like someone had just vanished mid-step. The ravens stopped flying over a particular stretch of road near mile 200, and I couldn't figure out why. The truckers were acting strange too. Normally they're chatty on the CB radio, telling jokes and complaining about their loads. But suddenly, everyone was quiet. When I'd check on them at the emergency stations, they'd give me short answers and avoid eye contact. A few of them mentioned seeing trucks that weren't on the daily manifest, extra rigs in their convoy that disappeared when they looked twice. I figured it was just the cold getting to everyone. January is brutal up here, and this year was worse than usual. We'd had 3 weeks straight of temperatures below -55. Cold enough to freeze diesel fuel and crack steel. Cold like that messes with your mind. You start seeing things that aren't there. But I was wrong about it being the cold. I was wrong about a lot of things. The first accident happened on January 18th, mile marker 287. I got the call around 6 a.m. from dispatch in Fairbanks. A trucker named Pete Morrison hadn't checked in at the Coldfoot station like he was supposed to. His GPS tracker showed his truck stopped about 15 miles north of my cabin. I threw on my gear and headed out in my patrol truck. The temperature was -58, cold enough that my breath froze instantly and my truck's engine barely wanted to turn over. The sun wouldn't come up for another 2 hours, so I was driving by headlight through a world of black ice and white snow. I found Pete's truck easily enough. It was a blue Kenworth, sitting right in the middle of the road with the engine still running. The headlights were on, windshield wipers going, and I could see heat shimmer rising from the exhaust stack. Everything looked perfectly normal, except for one thing. Pete was gone. I parked behind his truck and walked up to investigate. The driver's door was hanging wide open, which was crazy because you'd die in minutes in that cold without protection. Pete's coffee was still steaming in the cup holder. His logbook was open on the passenger seat, and the last entry was from 3:47 a.m., just 2 hours before. I called out his name, thinking maybe he'd gone to check his load or something. My voice echoed off the empty mountains, and the only sound that came back was the wind. I walked around the entire truck, checking the trailer and looking for signs of what might have happened. That's when I found the footprints. They started at the driver's door and headed straight out into the wilderness. Not toward the emergency station, not following the road, straight into the deep snow toward the mountains. The prints were definitely from Pete's boots. I recognized the tread pattern. But here's the thing that made my blood freeze. The footprints just stopped. After about 50 yards, they just ended, like Pete had been lifted up into the air. I followed the trail 3 times, thinking I'd missed something. But there was no mistake. The prints led to a spot in the snow, and then there was nothing. No disturbance, no signs of a struggle, no other tracks. Just Pete's boot prints ending in the middle of nowhere. I radioed for backup and waited with the truck until the state police showed up 4 hours later. While I waited, I checked Pete's CB radio and found something that made my hands shake. The radio was set to channel 19, same as always, but when I tried to call in, I heard voices, truckers talking to each other, normal conversation about road conditions and delivery schedules. The problem was, there weren't any other trucks on that section of road. I'd checked the manifest twice. Pete was supposed to be alone out there. I wrote it all up in my report, but I didn't mention the voices on the radio. Sounded too crazy. The police figured Pete had suffered some kind of mental breakdown from the cold and wandered off into the snow. Happens sometimes. They called off the search after 3 days when they couldn't find any trace of him. But I knew something else was going on. You don't survive 14 years on the ice road without learning to trust your instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming that this wasn't a normal disappearance. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, it was Maria Santos, one of the few women drivers who regularly ran the ice road. Tough as nails, been driving up here for 8 years. I found her truck at mile 201, engine running, door open, no sign of Maria anywhere. Same footprints leading into the snow, same sudden stop with no explanation. The difference was Maria's CB radio. It was tuned to channel 9, which is the emergency frequency. When I turned it on, I heard a voice I recognized. It was Pete Morrison. Breaker 1 to 9, this is Pete in the blue Kenworth. Got a convoy of 4 trucks heading northbound at mile 290. Road conditions are good, temperature holding steady at -45. I grabbed the handset so fast I almost dropped it. Pete, this is Michael Steele. Where are you? The radio went quiet for a moment. Then Pete's voice came back, but different somehow, distant. Michael? That you, buddy? I'm right here on the road. Can't you see me? I looked around at the empty highway. Nothing but snow and darkness in both directions. Pete, I'm at mile 201. Your truck's been sitting empty for 3 days. Where are you? Another pause. Then, I'm driving north with the convoy. We're always driving north. It's a good job, Michael. Peaceful. The company takes real good care of us. What company? Who's driving with you? But the radio had gone dead. I tried calling Pete back for 20 minutes, switching through every channel. Nothing. When I finally gave up and called dispatch to report Maria's disappearance, they told me something that made my blood turn to ice. Pete Morrison had been found that morning, frozen to death in a snowbank 12 miles from where his truck was discovered. He'd been dead for at least 2 days. So, whose voice had I just heard on the radio? After Maria disappeared, I stopped sleeping properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear Pete's voice on the radio, talking about his convoy and how peaceful it was. During my patrols, I started seeing things that didn't make sense. Truck tracks in the snow where no trucks were supposed to be. CB chatter from drivers who weren't on the manifest. Headlights in my rearview mirror that vanished when I slowed down to let them pass. The other truckers were getting spooked too. Half of them were asking for police escorts, and the other half were refusing to drive alone at night. On January 25th, I decided to do some research. I drove down to Fairbanks and spent the day at the state archives, looking up accident reports from the Dalton Highway's early days. What I found made my hands shake. The road was built in the 1970 seconds to support the oil pipeline. Dozens of construction workers died during those years. Avalanches, equipment failures, exposure. But there was a pattern in the reports that nobody had ever connected. Every winter, starting the year after the road opened, there were disappearances. Drivers vanishing from their vehicles with no explanation, always during the coldest weeks, always in the same general area between mile 180 and mile 300. The reports described the same details I'd been seeing. Engines left running, driver doors open, footprints leading nowhere. Over the years, it happened to at least 30 people. Some of the bodies were found later, frozen in remote locations. Others were never found at all. But here's the thing that really got to me. Many of the reports mentioned CB radio conversations with the missing drivers after they'd disappeared. Voices from trucks that weren't there, talking about convoys that didn't exist. I drove back to my cabin that night with a head full of questions and no good answers. The temperature was dropping again, forecast to hit -60 by midnight. I was monitoring the radio, listening to the truckers check in at various mile markers, when I heard a familiar voice. Breaker 1 to 9, this is Maria, in the red Peterbilt. Just past mile 250, heading north with good company. Roads clear and beautiful tonight. I grabbed the handset. Maria? Maria Santos? Hey there, Michael. Good to hear your voice. You should join us sometime. It's real peaceful out here. Maria, you've been missing for a week. Everyone's looking for you. A pause. Then, missing? I'm not missing. I'm right here on the road, same as always. We're all here. Who's we, Maria? Oh, you know, Pete and Joe Hendricks and Tommy Veal and Sarah Connors, all the old-timers. We take care of each other out here. My blood went cold. I knew those names. Joe Hendricks disappeared in 1984. Tommy Veal vanished in 1986. Sarah Connors went missing the winter before I got hired. Maria, those people are dead. Dead? She laughed, but it sounded strange over the radio. Hollow. Nobody's dead, Michael. We're just driving, always driving north. The company keeps us busy, and the pay is good. What company? You'll understand when you join us. And you will join us, Michael. We've been watching you for a long time. You'd fit right in with our convoy. The radio went silent. I tried calling back, but there was no response. I spent the rest of that night parked outside the Coldfoot station, watching the road with binoculars. Around 3 a.m., I saw something that almost made me crash my truck. A convoy of 5 trucks was moving north on the highway, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I could see them clearly through the binoculars, different models and colors, running in perfect formation about 50 yards apart. The lead truck was a blue Kenworth. Pete's truck. I started my engine and pulled onto the highway, trying to catch up to them. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't get closer. The convoy stayed the same distance ahead of me, like they were matching my speed exactly. I pushed my truck up to 70 miles per hour, which was insane on that icy road, but the convoy stayed ahead. Then, as I watched, the trucks started to fade, like someone was turning down their brightness. Within 30 seconds, they were gone completely. I was alone on the highway again, nothing ahead of me but empty road. I pulled over and checked my odometer. I'd driven 15 miles chasing ghosts. The next morning, I got a call that made everything worse. Jake Brewster, one of my oldest friends, hadn't checked in at Dead Horse. He was driving a fuel tanker, making the same run he'd done 100 times before. The last GPS ping from his truck showed him stopped at mile 267. I raced up there, dreading what I'd find. Jake's truck was sitting in the middle of the road, engine running, driver door hanging open. His coffee was still warm. His CB radio was tuned to channel 19. I picked up the handset with shaking hands. Jake? Jake, are you out there? A crackle of static. Then, Michael? That you, buddy? Jake, where are you? Your truck's empty. I'm right here in my cab. Can't you see me? I looked at the empty driver's seat. No, Jake, you're not there. That's strange. Well, doesn't matter. I'm with the convoy now. Pete and Maria are here. We're heading north to make our deliveries. Jake, listen to me. You need to come back. Your truck is stopped on the highway. You're not driving anywhere. Sure I am. We're always driving, Michael. It's what we do. Hey, want to join us? There's room for one more in the convoy. The company's always hiring good drivers. What company? You'll see. Look for our headlights tonight. We'll be waiting for you. The radio went dead. I sat in my truck, staring at Jake's empty cab, and finally understood what was happening. The ice road wasn't just dangerous because of the cold and the isolation. Something else was hunting out here. Something that collected drivers and made them part of its own convoy. A phantom fleet that only existed in the deepest cold, driven by people who didn't know they were dead. And it wanted me to join them. That night, I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of going home to my cabin, I stayed at the Coldfoot station. I told the manager I was conducting a special patrol and needed to monitor the radio all night. What I really wanted was to be around other people when the temperature dropped to -60. I was right to be scared. Around midnight, my CB radio crackled to life. Multiple voices this time, all talking at once. Pete, Maria, Jake, and others I didn't recognize. They were coordinating like a real convoy, calling out mile markers and road conditions. But according to my GPS tracker, there were no trucks anywhere near those locations. Breaker 1 to 9, this is convoy leader. We're approaching mile 200, heading north. Michael, you copy? I hesitated, then picked up the handset. I copy. Good, we've been waiting. For you, buddy. Time to join the team. Head north from Coldfoot and look for our lights. I'm staying put tonight. Aw, come on, Michael. Don't you want to see Sarah again? My hands started shaking. Sarah was my wife's name. My dead wife. She's been asking about you. Wants to know why you haven't visited. She's riding in the sleeper cab of my truck, wants to talk to you. I almost dropped the radio. That's impossible. Sarah never drove trucks. She died in a car accident. Death's just a change of employment, Michael. She's with the company now, same as all of us. Here, I'll put her on. The radio went quiet for a moment. Then I heard a voice that made my heart stop. Michael? Honey, is that you? It sounded exactly like Sarah. Same voice, same tone, same way she always said my name. But it couldn't be her. I'd buried her 4 years ago. I miss you so much, Michael. It's lonely here without you. Why don't you come drive with us? We could be together. Again, I was crying now, couldn't help it. Sarah, you're dead. I watched them put you in the ground. I'm not dead, honey. I'm just working a different route now. And I'm cold. So very cold. I need you to warm me up. Come drive with us tonight. This isn't real. You're not Sarah. Look out your window, Michael. See our headlights? We're waiting for you. I looked out the station window and saw them. 5 sets of headlights lined up on the highway, engines idling, waiting. Just walk outside, honey. Get in your truck and follow us north. It'll be just like old times. We can drive together forever. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay inside, but Sarah's voice was so real, so convincing. I found myself walking toward the door, my hand reaching for the handle. That's it, Michael. Come to us. The convoy's ready to roll. I was halfway out the door when I saw something that snapped me back to reality. My breath wasn't fogging in the air. It was -60 outside, but I wasn't seeing my breath. That meant the voices weren't coming from inside the station. They were coming from outside. The phantoms were right there, just beyond the door. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Michael? Sarah's voice was different now, angry. Michael, why won't you come outside? Don't you love me anymore? You're not Sarah. Sarah would never ask me to leave our kids without a father. The voice on the radio turned cold and hateful. You can't hide in there forever. We'll wait. We're very patient. I spent the next 6 hours inside that station, listening to the phantom convoy on the radio. They tried every trick they could think of. They used Sarah's voice, then my kids' voices, then my dead father's voice. They promised me everything I wanted. Reunion with my wife, an easy job, an end to loneliness. But I knew it was all lies. The real Sarah would never have wanted me to abandon our children. The real Sarah would have told me to live, not to join the dead. As dawn approached, the voices on the radio grew weaker. By sunrise, they were gone completely. I looked out the window and saw empty highway. The phantom convoy had vanished with the darkness. I called dispatch and requested immediate backup. When the state police arrived, I told them everything. They thought I'd suffered a nervous breakdown from stress and isolation. They were probably right, from their perspective. But I knew what I'd experienced was real. The ice road had been hunting me, just like it had hunted all the others. And it would keep hunting until I found a way to stop it. The next day, I implemented new safety protocols for the Dalton Highway. Mandatory shelter-in-place orders whenever the temperature dropped below -55. No solo driving during extreme cold snaps. Regular radio check-ins every 15 minutes. Emergency heaters installed at every station. The state transportation department thought I was being overly cautious, but they went along with it because of my safety record. They didn't need to know the real reason for the new rules. The protocols worked. There were no more disappearances that winter. Oh, the phantom convoy still came out during the coldest nights. I could hear them on the radio sometimes, calling for drivers to join them. But with the new safety measures, no one was alone on the road when they appeared. I transferred to a desk job in Fairbanks at the end of that winter. told everyone I wanted to be closer to my kids, which was partly true. But the real truth was I couldn't drive the ice road anymore. Every time I tried, I'd start hearing Sarah's voice on the radio, calling for me to join her. I'm 55 now, 16 years later. I manage highway safety from an office, analyzing data and writing reports. But I still monitor the radio frequencies from the ice road, especially during cold snaps. The Phantom Convoy is still out there. I hear them sometimes, late, at night when the temperature drops and the road is empty. Pete's still leading them, his blue Kenworth at the front of the line. Maria drives her red Peterbilt right behind him. Jake follows in his fuel tanker. They've picked up new members over the years, drivers who broke protocol, who drove alone when they shouldn't have, who listened to the voices and followed the lights. They're patient. They can wait decades for the right combination of extreme cold and isolated driver. And when they find one, they offer everything a lonely trucker wants to hear. Steady work, good company, and the promise that the road goes on forever. Last winter, a rookie driver named Tommy Chen went missing near mile 250. Broke protocol, drove alone during a -58 cold snap. They found his truck empty, engine running, driver door open. Same pattern as always. That night, I heard a new voice on the radio. Young guy, scared but trying to sound confident. Breaker 1 to 9, this is Tommy in the yellow Freightliner. Just joined the convoy. These guys are great, they really know the road. I tried to warn him, but it was too late. He was already part of the Phantom fleet, driving eternal routes through the frozen darkness. Sometimes, I wonder if I should have joined them that night at Coldfoot. Maybe it would have been easier than living with the guilt of knowing I could have saved them somehow. But then I think about my kids, about the other drivers I've kept safe with the new protocols, and I know I made the right choice. The ice road is still dangerous, it always will be. But now we know what's hunting out there in the cold, and we know how to protect ourselves. As long as drivers follow the rules, stay warm, and never drive alone in the deep cold, they'll be safe. But on the coldest nights, when the temperature drops below -55 and the aurora dances across the sky, you can still hear them on Channel 19. The Phantom Convoy, forever heading north, their ghostly voices crackling through the static. Breaker 1 to 9, convoys rolling, we're always hiring good drivers. Join us on the ice road. The company takes real good care of its people. The road goes on forever, and the convoy is always recruiting. My name is Samuel Kodiak, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier Bay National Park for 25 years. I've pulled 23 people out of crevasses, survived 3 avalanches, and watched glaciers the size of cities break apart and crash into the sea. I thought I knew ice. I thought I understood how glaciers worked. I was wrong about everything. Before I tell you what really happened in August of 1958, you need to understand something about me. I'm not the kind of man who jumps at shadows or believes in ghost stories. I spent 4 years in the Navy during the war, fighting in the Pacific. I've seen things that would make most people curl up and quit. When I came back from the war, Alaska felt like peace. The ice and snow and endless wilderness meant safety. Glacier Bay is different from other places. It's wild in a way that makes city folks nervous. You can only get here by boat, and when the weather turns bad, you're stuck. The glaciers here are what we call tidewater glaciers. They flow right down to the ocean. When chunks break off, they make sounds like thunder. The ice can be 300 feet thick, sometimes more. In summer, we get scientists. They come to study the glaciers, take ice samples, measure how fast the ice moves. Most of them are good people, just trying to understand how the world works. But this research team was different from the start. Dr. Helen Morrison led the group. She was a specialist in something called paleobiology, studying ancient life trapped in ice. With her came 2 graduate students, Mike Chen and Sarah Williams, and a drilling expert named Tom Bradley. They had permits to take core samples from the Muir Glacier, one of our biggest. We're looking for organic material, Dr. Morrison explained when they arrived at my ranger station. Plant matter, maybe small animals, things that got trapped when the glacier formed thousands of years ago. I helped them load their equipment onto the May boat. They had a portable drill that could go deep into the ice, machines to keep samples frozen, and enough supplies for 2 weeks. Standard research gear. The glacier's been acting strange lately, I told Dr. Morrison as we headed across the bay. Moving faster than usual. The ice is making noises I've never heard before. She smiled. Glaciers are always changing, Mr. Kodiak. That's what makes them so interesting. I should have trusted my instincts, should have turned that boat around right then. The Muir Glacier rises from the water like a blue and white wall. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time. The face of the glacier is constantly breaking apart. We call it calving. Huge chunks of ice fall into the water with sounds like explosions. The danger isn't just the falling ice, it's the waves that come after. A big piece can create a wave 20 feet high. We set up base camp on the rocky shore, about a quarter-mile from the glacier face, far enough to be safe from calving, close enough to access the ice. I've made this kind of camp 100 times. Everything was normal, except for the seals. Usually, Glacier Bay is full of harbor seals. They like to rest on the ice floes, and the water is rich with fish. But as we unloaded the research equipment, I noticed something odd. No seals. The water was empty. Even the birds seemed nervous, flying in tight circles instead of diving for fish. "Where are all the animals?" Sarah asked. She was the younger graduate student, maybe 25, with the kind of excitement that made her ask questions about everything. "Sometimes they move to other areas," I said. But in 25 years, I'd never seen the bay this empty. That first night, we heard the glacier singing. That's what I called it, anyway. Around midnight, I was awakened by a sound I couldn't identify. It was like whale song, but deeper, longer. The sound seemed to come from inside the ice itself. Low notes that you felt in your bones more than heard with your ears. I found Dr. Morrison standing outside her tent, listening. "Thermal expansion," she said when she saw me. "When glaciers move, the ice makes noise. It's perfectly normal." But her voice had a question in it, and I'd been listening to glacier sounds for 25 years. This was something new. The next morning, Tom Bradley fired up the ice drill for the first time. The plan was simple: drill cores from different parts of the glacier, package them in dry ice, and ship them back to the university for study. The drill bit into the blue ice like it was cutting through butter. Everything went wrong at the first sample. The ice core came up dark. I was watching from about 50 feet away when Tom pulled the first sample from the glacier. Ice cores are usually clear blue or white, sometimes with tiny air bubbles trapped inside. This one looked like it had been mixed with chocolate milk. "That's not right," Tom muttered, holding up the cylinder of ice. "This looks like there's organic matter all through it, Doctor." Morrison hurried over with her sample containers. "This is exactly what we hoped to find," she said, but I could hear the confusion in her voice. Though I've never seen this much biological material in a single core. Sarah started taking pictures while Mike prepared the sample for storage. I walked over to get a closer look. The ice wasn't just dark, it was moving. Not melting, exactly, but the dark material inside seemed to shift and swirl like smoke in water. When Dr. Morrison held it up to the light, I could see what looked like tiny fibers running through the ice, like blood vessels. "How old do you think this is?" Mike asked. "The glacier formed roughly 12,000 years ago, Doctor," Morrison said. "So, whatever's in here has been frozen for at least that long." But as I watched, one of the dark fibers twitched. "Did you see that?" I asked. "See what?" Dr. Morrison was busy labeling the sample container. I stared at the ice core, but the movement had stopped. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe the warming air was making the ice shift. But my hands felt cold, despite the August sunshine. Tom drilled 3 more cores that morning. Each one came up darker than the last. By noon, the samples looked almost black, filled with organic material that seemed to pulse and move when nobody was looking directly at it. "This is incredible, Doctor," Morrison said as we broke for lunch. "We might be looking at a completely preserved ecosystem from the last ice age." I was less excited. Something about those samples made my skin crawl. The way they seemed to watch you. The way they made the air smell different, like the ocean during a storm. All salt and electricity. After lunch, Tom moved the drill to a new location, about 100 yards along the glacier face. The ice here looked different. Cleaner, with fewer cracks and air, bubbles. More importantly, it was quieter. The strange singing sounds from the night before had seemed to come from this area. "Let's see what's hiding in here," Tom said, starting up the drill. The bit had only gone about 6 feet into the ice when it stopped. "That's weird," Tom said, checking the engine. "It's like I hit something solid." He tried again, but the drill wouldn't go any deeper. The engine was running fine, but the bit just spun in place. "Maybe there's rock embedded in the ice?" Mike suggested. "No," Tom said, pulling out the bit to examine it. "Look at this." The drill bit was perfectly clean. No ice shavings, no rock dust, nothing. Like it had been drilling through empty air. "That's impossible," Dr. Morrison said. "The drill was definitely hitting something." Tom lowered a flashlight down the hole. We all gathered around to look. The hole went down about 6 feet, just like Tom said. But at the bottom, instead of more ice or rock, there was something else. Something that reflected the flashlight beam like black glass. "What is that?" Sarah whispered. None of us had an answer. Dr. Morrison made the decision to widen the hole. It took Tom 2 hours with a hand drill and ice axes to chip away enough ice to get a better view. What we found made no sense. There was a chamber inside the glacier. Not a crack or a crevasse. An actual hollow space, perfectly round, about the size of a small room. The walls were smooth, like they'd been carved. But glaciers don't form hollow chambers. The weight of the ice above would collapse any empty space. "This has to be natural, Doctor," Morrison said, but she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "Maybe a pocket of gas got trapped when the glacier formed." I lowered myself down into the chamber with a rope. My flashlight beam revealed walls of ice so clear they looked like crystal. But embedded in those walls, like insects in amber, were shapes. Dark shapes that might have been plants or animals or something else entirely. And in the center of the chamber, sitting on the ice floor like it had been placed there, was something that made my blood freeze. It was a piece of metal, corroded and ancient, but definitely man-made, a tool of some kind, with strange markings carved into the handle. "Bring it up, Doctor," Morrison called down to me. The moment I touched the metal tool, every piece of equipment in our camp started going crazy. The portable radio erupted in static. Mike's camera started clicking on its own. Tom's drill, turned off and sitting 50 yards away, began spinning. And from somewhere deep inside the glacier, that singing sound started again. Louder this time, closer. I dropped the tool and climbed out of that hole as fast as I could. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." But Dr. Morrison was already making plans to explore the chamber further. The excitement in her voice drowned out my warnings. She couldn't see what I could see, that the shapes embedded in the glacier walls had started to move. That night, Sarah Williams disappeared. I found Sarah's sleeping bag empty at dawn. Her boots were still lined up neatly outside her tent. Her jacket hung on a camp chair like she'd just stepped away for a moment. But Sarah was gone. "She probably went to look at the glacier," Mike said when I woke the others. "She was excited about those samples." But I knew better. In 25 years of guiding people through Alaskan wilderness, I'd learned to read the signs. Sarah hadn't wandered off. Something had taken her. We spent the morning searching the shoreline and calling her name. Our voices echoed off the glacier face, but there was no answer. Just that low, singing sound from deep inside the ice. "Doctor." Morrison wanted to continue working. "Sarah's probably fine," she said. "She's a graduate student in glaciology. She knows how to be safe around ice." I should have insisted we leave right then. Should have radioed for a Coast Guard helicopter and gotten everyone out. But Dr. Morrison had permits, and she outranked me when it came to research decisions. All I could do was stay close and watch for more trouble. Tom went back to drilling. This time, he worked on the far side of the chamber we'd found, trying to determine how large the hollow space really was. Every core he brought up was filled with that dark, moving organic material, and each sample seemed more active than the last. "It's like the ice is alive," Mike whispered to me while Dr. Morrison was busy with her equipment. I'd been thinking the same thing, but hearing someone else say it made it worse. Around noon, Tom's drill broke through into another chamber. This one was larger than the first, and when we lowered lights down, we could see it extended further into the glacier than our flashlight beams could reach. "This is impossible, Doctor," Morrison said. "But," Her voice had lost its scientific confidence. Glaciers don't have cave systems. I was starting to think we weren't dealing with a normal glacier. The proof came when Tom volunteered to explore the new chamber. We rigged up climbing ropes and lowered him down with a powerful lantern. His voice echoed up from the hole as he described what he was seeing. "The walls are covered in those embedded shapes," he called, "but they're bigger down here. Some of them look almost human-sized." Then his voice changed. Got quieter, scared. "There's something else down here," he said. "Something that doesn't belong." "What do you see?" Dr. Morrison called down. "Tools. Lots of them. But they're from different time periods. I see what looks like stone axes, and there's metal stuff too, modern metal." My stomach dropped. "Tom, get out of there. Now." "Wait." His voice came up from the chamber. "There's someone down here. Someone in the ice." We heard Tom scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure terror. The kind of sound that means something is so wrong, so impossible, that your mind can't process it. Then the rope went slack. I was already putting on climbing gear when Tom's voice came up from the chamber again. But it sounded different. Slower. Like he was talking in his sleep. "It's beautiful down here," he said. "So peaceful. The ice is warm. Why don't you come down and see?" "Doctor." Morrison started to lower another rope. I stopped her. "That's not Tom anymore," I said. She looked at me like I was crazy. "Of course it's Tom. We just heard him." "Listen to his voice," I said. "Tom's from Texas. He has an accent." That voice has no accent at all. We both listened as the voice continued to call up from the chamber, asking us to come down, telling us how wonderful it was in the ice. The words were Tom's, but the way they were spoken, it was like something else was wearing his voice like a mask. I made the decision to rope down and get him. The chamber was even stranger than Tom had described. The walls weren't just covered with embedded shapes, they were covered with embedded things. Plants, animals, objects from dozens of different time periods, all perfectly preserved in crystal clear ice. I saw what looked like a saber-toothed cat, a Native American spear, a pair of eyeglasses that looked like they were from the 1940s. And standing in the center of the chamber, perfectly still, was Tom. His eyes were open, but he wasn't seeing me. Ice crystals had formed in his hair and on his clothes, but he wasn't shivering. He looked peaceful. Content. Like he'd found exactly what he was looking for. "Tom," I called, "we need to go, now." He turned toward me, and I saw that his eyes had changed color. Instead of brown, they were the pale blue of glacier ice. "Why would we leave?" he asked in that flat, accentless voice. "This is where we belong. This is where everything belongs." Behind Tom, in the far wall of the chamber, I could see Sarah. She was embedded in the ice like all the other specimens, but her eyes were open and moving. She was looking at me. Her mouth was moving like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. That's when I understood what we were dealing with. This wasn't just a glacier. It was something alive, something that collected things, and now it wanted to collect us. I grabbed Tom's arm, but his skin felt wrong, too cold, too smooth, like it was already starting to turn into ice. "The ice preserves everything," Tom said. "Every moment, every memory. You'll never feel pain or fear or loneliness again. Isn't that what everyone wants?" I looked at Sarah trapped in the ice wall, her eyes wide with terror, and knew that whatever this thing was offering, it wasn't peace. It was something much worse. I ran. I climbed out of that chamber faster than I'd ever moved in my life. Dr. Morrison was waiting at the top, and when she saw my face, she knew something terrible had happened. "Where's Tom?" she asked. "Gone," I said, "same as Sarah. This whole glacier is alive, and it's hunting us." I expected her to argue, to demand scientific explanations. Instead, she just nodded. "I know," she said quietly. "The samples we collected this morning, they're moving. Really moving. And they're trying to get out of the containers." We looked back toward our camp and saw that she was right. The sample containers were rocking back and forth like there were small animals trapped inside. But worse than that, the dark organic material was seeping through the walls of the containers, spreading across our equipment like spilled oil. "What is it?" Dr. Morrison asked. I remembered the tool I'd found in the first chamber. The metal, with the strange markings. The way all our equipment had gone haywire when I touched it. "I think it's been here a long time," I said. "Longer than the glacier. Maybe longer than the Ice Age. It's been collecting things, preserving them, plants, animals, people. Anything it finds interesting." Mike came running from the camp. "The radio's dead," he said. "And the boat engine won't start. It's like something drained all the power." That's when we heard Tom's voice again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the chamber. It was coming from everywhere at once. From the ice, from the air, from inside our own heads. "Why are you running?" the voice asked. "Don't you want to be preserved? Don't you want to be part of something eternal?" The glacier started to move. I don't mean the normal, slow flow that all glaciers have. I mean, it started to move like a living thing. The ice face began to shift and reshape itself, creating new cracks and crevasses, forming what looked almost like features, like a face. "It's been pretending to be a glacier," Dr. Morrison whispered, "hiding, but now it doesn't need to hide anymore." The crazy screet, thing that had been pretending to be the Muir Glacier, began to hunt us actively. Ice formed under our feet as we ran, trying to trap our boots. Crevasses opened and closed like mouths trying to swallow us. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds, and our breath came out in white clouds that hung in the air too long, like the cold itself was becoming solid. We made it to where our boat should have been, and found only a boat-shaped hollow in the ice. The creature had frozen the entire shoreline, trapping our escape route in 6 feet of solid ice. "The emergency radio," I said, "in my pack, if we can get a signal out." But when I opened my pack, I found that the radio had been crushed. Not by accident, by something with tremendous strength and very precise control. Something that had reached into my pack and destroyed the one thing that could have saved us. Mike was crying. "Doctor," Morrison was staring at the glacier face, which was now definitely moving, toward us, with purpose. And I was trying to remember everything I'd learned in the Navy about explosives. "How much fuel do we have left?" I asked. "Maybe 2 gallons of gas for the drill," Dr. Morrison said. "Why?" "Because I'm going to blow a hole in this thing." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only plan I had. In the Navy, I'd learned that even the biggest, strongest things usually had weak points. For ships, it was the engine room. For this creature, I was betting it was the chambers where it kept its specimens. I rigged up the most dangerous explosive device I could manage with camping gear and drill fuel. The plan was to lower it into the chamber where Tom and Sarah were trapped, detonate it, and hope the explosion would damage the creature enough to force it to retreat. "It'll bring the whole ice face down on us," Dr. Morrison said. "Better than being frozen alive for the next 1,000 years, I replied. The creature seemed to sense what I was planning. The ice around us began to shift more aggressively. Walls of ice rose from the ground, trying to box us in. The temperature kept dropping. My fingers were so numb I could barely work the detonator. But I'd survived 4 years of war. I'd seen ships sink and planes crash and friends die. This thing might be ancient and alien and impossibly powerful, but it had made one mistake. It had tried to preserve people who didn't want to be preserved. I could hear Sarah and Tom calling from inside the ice, their real voices this time, begging for help. The creature might be using their bodies, but their minds were still trapped inside, aware and terrified. I lowered the explosive into the chamber and ran. The explosion tore through the glacier like thunder. Chunks of ice the size of cars flew through the air. The creature's voice, no longer pretending to be Tom or Sarah, rose to a shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once. For a moment, I thought we'd killed it. Then the real glacier face began to collapse. The avalanche should have killed us all. Millions of tons of ice and rock came crashing down from the glacier face, burying our camp and filling the bay with chunks of ice the size of buildings. We survived only because I knew enough about avalanches to recognize the safe spots. The places where falling ice would pile up instead of crushing everything underneath. We found Sarah and Tom in the wreckage, unconscious but alive. The explosion had somehow freed them from whatever the creature had done to them. Tom's eyes were brown again, and Sarah was shivering, a good sign that her body temperature was returning to normal. But the creature wasn't dead. As we waited for the Coast Guard helicopter, I'd finally been able to call on Tom's backup radio. I could see it retreating deeper into the glacier. The ice was flowing backward, against all natural laws, carrying the creature away from the damaged area. It was wounded, but not destroyed. What do we tell them? Dr. Morrison asked, watching the helicopter approach. Research accident, I said. Explosive decompression in an ice cave. Equipment failure. No one will question it. And no one did. The official report listed the incident as a drilling accident that caused a partial collapse of the glacier face. The area was declared off-limits to future research. Our samples were lost in the chaos, and without evidence, Dr. Morrison's team had no proof of what we'd really found. Tom and Sarah recovered, but neither of them remembered anything about being preserved in the ice. They thought they'd been knocked unconscious by falling ice and had dreams about being frozen. I never corrected them. Some things are better forgotten. I requested a transfer to watch over that section of Glacier Bay. Officially, I'm here to monitor for geological instability. Unofficially, I'm here to watch for signs that the creature is returning, because it will return. Things that have survived for millions of years don't give up after one setback. And with global temperatures rising, the glaciers are melting faster every year. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that singing sound again, coming from deep inside the ice, calling, waiting. I've been keeping records, documenting every strange incident in Glacier Bay. Animals avoiding certain areas, tourists reporting equipment failures near the ice, unexplained temperature drops. The signs are all there for anyone who knows how to read them. The creature is still down there, in the deep ice where my explosives couldn't reach. It's healing, growing, learning. And someday, when the glaciers melt enough, or when it grows strong enough, it's going to come hunting again. I'll be ready for it. I have to be. Because now I know what's really hidden in the ice of Alaska, and I know that some things are too dangerous to preserve. My name is Samuel Kodiak, and I've been guarding Glacier Bay for 30 years now. People think I'm just an old ranger who's been in the wilderness too long. They think the cold has made me paranoid. They have no idea how right they are to be afraid of the ice. And they have no idea that the ice is afraid of me, too. For now, that's enough. But the glaciers are melting faster every year. My name is Anna Snowfoot, and I've been a park ranger on the Iditarod Trail for 12 years now. Before that, I raced dogs. Won some races too. Finished the Iditarod 3 times, which most people don't manage even once. I grew up mushing. My grandmother taught me when I was 6, same way her grandmother taught her. We're Yupik, and dogs have always been part of our lives. Not just for racing, for survival. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old mushers, the ones who carried medicine and mail across Alaska when that was the only way to get anything done. I loved racing, but I love this job more. I spend my time maintaining the trail, marking the safe routes, checking the emergency supply caches we keep every 20 miles. When the Iditarod runs each March, I'm out there making sure the racers stay safe. I know every mile of this trail, every dangerous turn, every spot where the ice gets thin, every place where wolves like to hunt. The trail's been here, forever. Well, not the racing trail that started in 1973, but the route itself is ancient. Native people traveled these paths for thousands of years. Then came the gold rush, and the mail runners, and the famous serum run in 1925 when mushers raced medicine to Nome to stop a diphtheria outbreak. My grandmother told me other stories too, about mushers who never came home, about dog teams you could hear but never see, about spirits who got lost in blizzards and kept running their routes forever, not knowing they were dead. I never believed those stories, not really. It was March 2024 when things started getting strange. The Iditarod was running, and I was out doing my usual job checking trail markers, making sure the route was clear after a storm. The weather was doing that thing it does in Alaska, where it can't decide if it wants to kill you with cold or just make you miserable with wind. I was at my checkpoint cabin, about 40 miles outside of Ruby, when the first racer came through, looking spooked. His name was Mike Chen, a veteran musher from Fairbanks. I'd known him for years. Tough guy, not easily rattled. But when he pulled into my checkpoint, his dogs were going crazy, barking and whining and trying to turn around. "Something's wrong with the trail," he said, not even waiting for coffee. About 10 miles back, my dog started freaking out. "What did you see?" I asked. "That's the thing, I didn't see anything. But I heard it. Dog team running flat out, really close. Moving fast. Way too fast. I figured someone was catching up to me, so I pulled over to let them pass. And? Nobody came, but I could still hear them. Paws hitting snow, the sled runners, heavy breathing, right next to me. My dogs could hear it too. They were terrified. I wrote it down in my log. Could have been wind playing tricks. Sound travels weird in Alaska, especially during storms. But Mike wasn't the type to imagine things. 2 hours later, another racer reported the same thing. Different spot on the trail, same story, phantom dog team running at impossible speeds. By the end of the day, 5 racers had told me similar stories. And that's when I noticed something in my own notes. All 5 sightings happened at the exact same spots where my grandmother's stories placed the old ghost mushers. I radioed headquarters that night. "We've got racers spooked, hearing things on the trail. Might be weather related, but I want to check it out." "Copy that," the dispatcher said. "Be careful out there." I should have told them everything. About the stories, about the pattern. But I didn't want them thinking I'd lost my mind. The next morning, I took my own team out to investigate. 7 dogs, I'd raised them all from puppies. Knew them better than I knew most people. They'd never let me down. We were 5 miles out when my lead dog, Nanook, started acting weird. His ears went flat, and he kept looking to the left, into the trees. The other dogs picked up on it. They were still running, but I could feel the tension in the line. Then I heard it. Dogs running. Close. Moving fast through the trees parallel to the trail. I couldn't see them, but I could hear everything. The panting, the jingle of harness clips, the soft thump of paws on snow. My dogs heard it too. They wanted to run, to get away from whatever was out there. "Easy," I called to them. "Easy now." But the sound kept pace with us, mile after mile, never getting closer, never falling behind. Just there, invisible in the trees. I've been in the wilderness my whole life. I know the sounds of the woods. This wasn't natural. This wasn't wind or echo or some other dog team. This was something else. We made it back to the checkpoint as the sun was setting. My dogs were exhausted, not from the run but from fear. They huddled together in their houses and wouldn't eat. That night, I called my grandmother. "Grandma," I said, "tell me again about the ghost mushers." There was a long silence on the phone. "Why are you asking, Anna?" "Because I think they're real." My grandmother came to the checkpoint the next day. She's 83, but she still moves like a woman half her age. She brought her medicine bag and a serious expression I'd only seen a few times in my life. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The racer reports, the sounds in the trees, how my dogs reacted. She listened without interrupting, her face getting more worried with every detail. "It's the Midnight Musher," she finally said. "Tommy Nyokpuk. He ran the serum route in 1925. I knew the history. In January 1925, diphtheria hit Nome. Children were dying. The only serum was in Anchorage, and the railroad only went as far as Nenana. So they organized a relay, 20 mushers, 674 miles, 5.5 days in the worst weather Alaska could throw at them. Most people only know about Balto and Togo, the lead dogs of the final mushers. But there were 20 teams total. And according to my grandmother, not all of them made it. Tommy was carrying the serum on the northern route, Grandma said, backup plan in case the main relay failed. But a blizzard hit, temperatures dropped to 70 below. They found his sled 3 weeks later, empty. Never found Tommy or his dogs. The serum? Gone. They figured he tried to keep going, even when he should have stopped. Tommy was like that, stubborn. He'd promised to deliver that medicine, and he wouldn't quit. So he's still trying? That's what the old people say. Every year during the Iditarod, when conditions match that storm, Tommy runs his route. Still trying to deliver medicine that doesn't exist anymore. Still racing against a deadline from 1,925. A racer came through while we were talking. Sarah Rodriguez, a rookie from Colorado. Young, maybe 25, running her first Iditarod. "I need to report." "Something," she said. She looked embarrassed. "I think I'm going crazy." "What happened?" I asked. I saw a dog team. Out on the trail, about 15 miles back, old-style sled, and the musher was wearing really vintage gear. Like 1,920 seconds vintage. I tried to catch up because I thought maybe someone was doing a historical run or something, but what? He was too fast. Way too fast. I've been racing for 3 years, and I've never seen dogs move like that. They were almost flying, and when I got close, my headlamp caught the musher's face. Sarah's hands were shaking. He looked right at me, and his eyes were empty. Not blind, just empty, like there was nothing behind them. And he smiled and waved me forward, like he wanted me to follow him. "Did you?" my grandmother asked sharply. I tried to. God help me, I wanted to. It felt important, like I needed to stay with him. But my dogs refused. They planted their feet and wouldn't budge. I've never seen them do that, so I turned around and came here instead. After Sarah left, Grandma grabbed my arm. "This is worse than I thought." "What do you mean?" "Tommy's not just running anymore. He's recruiting, trying to build a team to help him finish his mission. If someone follows him willingly, they join his race. And they never come back. That's not possible." "You heard the phantom dogs yourself, Anna. You going to tell me what's possible?" She was right. I couldn't deny what I'd experienced. That night, another racer went missing. Jeff Hamilton, experienced musher from Minnesota. His last GPS ping was at mile marker 247, right in the middle of the section where people kept reporting the phantom team. Search and rescue went out at first light. I went with them. We found Jeff's sled at mile 250, completely intact. His dogs were still in harness, unharmed but terrified. His gear was all there, food, sleeping bag, emergency supplies, but Jeff was gone. There were footprints leading away from the sled. Human footprints, heading north into the woods. We followed them for 3 miles until they just stopped. Not like he climbed a tree or got picked up. The prints just ended, mid-stride, in the middle of nowhere. But there were other tracks too. Dog tracks. Dozens of them, running in a tight pack. Old-fashioned sled tracks cutting through the snow. And human footprints that matched Jeff's, running alongside the dog team. Running, not walking. Like he was keeping pace with a moving sled. The tracks went on for another mile before disappearing completely. "What the hell?" one of the search team said. I knew what had happened. Jeff had seen Tommy. Tommy had called to him, and Jeff had followed. We searched for 2 more days. Found nothing. Jeff Hamilton was just gone, like he'd never existed. His family flew up from Minnesota. I had to tell them I didn't know what happened to their son. That he'd vanished in one of the safest, most monitored races in the world. The race officials wanted to shut down the event. Too dangerous, they said. Something wrong with the trail. But I knew the truth. The trail was fine. It was what was on the trail that was dangerous. That night, I loaded my sled. My grandmother watched from the cabin door. "You're going after him," she said, not a question. "I have to. Tommy won't let you take his recruits. He thinks he needs them to complete his mission. Then I'll help him complete it. Anna, he's been dead for almost 100 years. There's no serum to deliver. No children waiting for medicine. The mission is over. Not for him, and if I don't help him finish it, he'll keep taking people. Forever." Grandma came down the steps and pulled a small bundle from her medicine bag. Sage, sweetgrass, other herbs I recognized from childhood ceremonies. "Then take these. And remember, he's not evil, he's just lost. Help him find his way home." I packed the herbs in my parka and called my dogs. We headed out into the darkness, following a trail only the dead could see. The first night on Tommy's trail, nothing happened. My dogs ran steady, and I kept my eyes on the darkness between the trees. The temperature was dropping fast, 30 below, then 40. Perfect conditions for what my grandmother called thin places, where the living and dead got all mixed up. I'd studied the 1,925 serum run routes obsessively since my grandmother's warning. Tommy's backup route was supposed to go through 3 villages: Ruby, Galena, and Nulato. From there, it continued northwest toward Nome, about 280 miles total. But Tommy had disappeared somewhere between Galena and Nulato. That's where I was heading. Around midnight, my dog started acting weird again. Nanook kept turning his head to the left, like he was watching something pace us. The others picked up his nervousness. I could feel the gangline getting tight with tension. Then I heard the breathing. Not my dogs. Not me. Something else. Heavy, rhythmic breathing, like a team pushing hard. And underneath it, the whisper of sled runners on snow. "Tommy?" I called into the darkness. The breathing stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Even my dogs went quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then, from about 50 yards to my left, I heard a man's voice. "You shouldn't be here." I stopped my team. "My name is Anna Snowfoot. I'm here to help you." "Can't stop. Got to deliver the serum. Children are dying. Tommy, listen to me. Can't stop." And suddenly he was there, emerging from between the trees. Not slowly, not like a normal person walking. He was just suddenly there, like he'd always been there, and I was only now able to see him. His sled was old style, made of bent wood and rawhide. The dogs, 16 of them, all matched, looked like the working dogs from old photographs. Thick coats, intelligent eyes, muscles built for long hauls. But there was something wrong with all of them. They were slightly transparent, like I was seeing them through fog, and they didn't leave tracks in the snow, even though I could hear their paws hitting the ground. Tommy himself looked maybe 40. He wore furs and a parka that would have been normal in 1925 but looked ancient now. His face was weathered, his beard thick with ice. And his eyes, my God, his eyes were desperate. "The children," he said, "they're waiting, I promised." "Tommy, it's 2024. The serum run was 99 years ago." He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "That's not possible. I left Nanana yesterday. Just have to get through this storm, then I'll make Nome in time." "You didn't make it. There was a blizzard. You died out here." No, I'm still running. I can feel the sled, feel the dogs. This is real." But even as he said it, I could see doubt flicker across his face. Like part of him knew the truth but couldn't accept it. "I need to deliver the serum," he said again, quieter this time. "Children are dying." The serum made it. Another musher took a different route. "The children were saved. Your mission succeeded, just not the way you planned." "Then why am I still here?" "Because you don't believe it, because you still think you failed." Tommy looked down at his hands, turning them over slowly. For a moment, they became more solid, more real. Then they faded back to that ghostly transparency. "I have the medicine," he said. "It's right here in my sled. I just need to deliver it. Show me." He reached into his sled bag and pulled out a cylinder. An old-fashioned serum container, the kind they used in the 1920 seconds. But when I looked closely, I could see through it. It was as ghostly as everything else about him. "That's not real anymore, Tommy. It's been gone for almost a century." "Then, what was the point?" His voice cracked. "What was the point of any of it?" "I left my wife, left my children, promised them I'd come home. I drove my dogs to death in that storm. For what? For nothing?" "Not for nothing. You tried. You did everything you could. But I failed." "No, you." A sound cut me off. Dog teams? Plural, coming from different directions. And human voices calling out to Tommy. "Musher, wait for us. We can help you deliver it. We're right behind you." 3 figures emerged from the trees. I recognized them immediately: Jeff Hamilton, Sarah Rodriguez, and another racer who'd gone missing 2 days ago. They were driving phantom sleds pulled by phantom dogs, and they were smiling like everything was wonderful. "Jeff!" I shouted. "Sarah!" "Stop." But they didn't hear me. They only had eyes for Tommy. "We're here to help with the relay," Jeff said, "to make sure the medicine gets through." Tommy looked at them with heartbreaking hope. "You'll help me finish?" "Of course. That's what mushers do. We help each other." "No." I moved my sled between Tommy and the others. "They're not really here to help. You're recruiting them into your death. They'll run forever, just like you, never finishing, never resting." "But I need a team," Tommy said. "The storm's too big for one musher. That's why I failed before. But with help, you didn't fail. You died. There's a difference." Tommy's face twisted with pain. "I can feel them dying, the children. I can hear their mothers crying. I have to. It already happened, Tommy, 99 years ago. You can't change the past, Then I'll stay here until I can." And with that, he called to his dogs. They lurched forward, heading deeper into the wilderness. Jeff, Sarah, and the third racer followed immediately, their phantom teams keeping perfect pace. I tried to chase them, but my dogs wouldn't go. They planted their feet and whined, refusing to follow the dead, into wherever they were heading. Within seconds, Tommy and his new recruits disappeared into the darkness. I'd lost them. 3 more people trapped in Tommy's eternal race. 3 more families who'd never know what happened to their loved ones. Unless I could find a way to finish what Tommy started, I pulled out my satellite phone and called my grandmother. "I need help, real help. Tommy's not just running anymore, he's building an army of ghosts." "Then you need to give him what he needs to finish." "How?" "The serum is gone. The children are gone. Nome doesn't need medicine anymore." "The mission isn't about medicine, Anna. It's about completion. About keeping a promise. Find what he really needs to deliver, and you'll free him." I thought about that as I set up camp. Tommy had been running for 99 years because he believed he'd failed, because he couldn't let go of his promise. The serum was just a symbol. What Tommy really needed to deliver was himself. He needed to get home, to complete the journey, to know that his sacrifice meant something, and I was going to help him do it, even if it killed me. Because that's what mushers do. We help each other finish the race. I spent the next day gathering supplies and tracking Tommy's route through old records and my grandmother's stories. She talked to elders, pieced together where Tommy had been heading when he died. There was a village, not on any modern map, but it had existed in 1925. A small Yupik settlement called Tagruk, about 40 miles northwest of where Tommy had vanished. It had been his destination, a checkpoint where he was supposed to transfer the serum to the next musher in the relay. The village was long abandoned now. People had moved to larger settlements decades ago, but the location was still there, preserved in stories and old survey maps. That's where I needed to take Tommy. The problem was finding him again. He could be anywhere on his phantom trail, running in circles, recruiting more lost racers to his impossible mission. "You need to call him," my grandmother said when I explained my plan. "Make him come to you." "How?" "The old way. With ceremony, with respect. Ask the spirits to guide him home." So that night, I built a fire at my checkpoint cabin and laid out the herbs Grandma had given me. Sage for cleansing, sweetgrass for blessing, tobacco for offering. I'd seen Grandma do ceremonies my whole life, but I'd never done one alone. I felt like a kid playing dress-up, reciting words I barely understood. But as the smoke rose into the cold air, something changed. The temperature dropped even further. The stars got brighter, and the silence got so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. "Tommy Nayokpok," I said to the darkness, "I'm calling you. I know where you need to go. I know how to help you finish your mission." Nothing happened for a long moment. Then, from far away, I heard dogs howling. Not my dogs, they were sleeping in their houses. These howls were different, ancient, sad. The phantom team appeared at the edge of my firelight. Tommy looked exhausted, more transparent than before, like he was slowly fading away. Behind him, Jeff, Sarah, and the other racer looked the same, half there, half gone. "You called me," Tommy said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I know where you need to deliver the serum. Nome. I need to get to Nome." "No, you were never going to Nome. You were going to Tagruk, to transfer the serum to the next musher." Tommy's face went blank with confusion. I don't remember." "That's because you've been running so long you forgot the actual route. You've been chasing a finish line that was never yours. Your job was to get the serum to Kagruk. After that, someone else would take it the rest of the way. But the children were saved. By other mushers. By a whole relay of people working together. You were just one part of it, Tommy. An important part, but you didn't have to do it all alone." He looked down at the serum cylinder in his sled. "If I deliver this to Tagruk, it's over? It's over. You completed your mission. You kept your promise. And then?" He gestured to Jeff and the others. "What happens to them? They go home. They wake up. They get to finish their own races." Tommy was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at me with those desperate, ancient eyes. "Will you show me the way? I'm so tired, and I can't remember anymore." I can't remember anything except the storm and the children crying and the promise I made. I'll show you, I said. That's why I'm here. We set out at dawn, my real dogs in front, Tommy's phantom team running alongside. Jeff and the others followed behind, silent and confused, like sleepwalkers. The journey to Qikiqtagruq took 3 days. The weather got worse with each mile, wind picking up, temperature dropping, snow starting to fall. It was like we were running back through time, back to the storm that killed Tommy. My dogs were scared. They didn't like running beside ghosts, but they trusted me, so they kept going. Tommy talked as we traveled. Memories coming back in fragments. His wife's name was Annie. His children were Mary and Joseph. He'd promised them he'd be home by February. "What month is it?" he asked on the second day. "March." But the wrong March. 99 years wrong. My children. Are they? They lived long lives, Tommy. Had children of their own. Your great-great-grandchildren are probably still in Alaska somewhere, he cried when I told him that, silent tears freezing on his face. On the third day, we reached Qikiqtagruq. There wasn't much left, some foundation stones, a few rotted posts where cabins had stood, but the place still had a feeling to it, like the land remembered what had happened here. I stopped my team at what had been the main building. Tommy pulled up beside me. "This is it," I said. "This is where you were supposed to deliver the serum." Tommy looked around at the empty village. "There's no one here." "There is. Look." And suddenly there was. The village filled with people, phantom people from 1925, solid and real as Tommy himself. Families standing in doorways, children playing in the snow, and a musher waiting beside a sled, ready to take the relay. "Tommy Nyokpuk," the waiting musher said, "we've been expecting you." Tommy pulled the serum cylinder from his sled. His hands were shaking. "I'm sorry I'm late. The storm." "You're right on time," the musher said gently. "You did good. The serum got through. The children lived. Your part is done." Tommy held out the cylinder. When the other musher took it, both the serum and the musher began to fade. But they were smiling. "You can rest now," the musher said. "Your race is over." Tommy turned to look at me. He was becoming more solid, more real. The desperation was leaving his eyes, replaced by something that looked like peace. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for never giving up, for caring so much that you ran for 100 years. Tommy looked back at Jeff and the others. "Go home," he told them. "Wake up. Finish your own races." One by one, the recruited mushers blinked and gasped like they were surfacing from deep water. Jeff looked around in confusion. "Anna? Where? What happened? You got lost, but you're found now. Come on, let's get you back to the real race." Tommy's phantom team was fading too. The dogs lay down in the snow, finally allowed to rest. Tommy knelt beside his lead dog and stroked its head. "Good dogs," he whispered. "The best dogs. Thank you for running so far." Then he looked at me one last time. "Will you tell my family? If you ever find them, tell them I tried. Tell them I'm sorry I didn't make it home." "You made it home. Just fine, Tommy. You're a hero. Everyone knows the story of the 1925 serum run. Everyone knows what you tried to do." He smiled. A real smile, full of relief and joy and exhaustion. Then, it wasn't for nothing. It was never for nothing. Tommy Nyokpuk and his team faded away like morning fog, leaving nothing behind but silence and the wind through the empty village. We got Jeff, Sarah, and the third racer, his name was Carlos, back to civilization 3 days later. They didn't remember much, just darkness and the feeling of running, and a voice telling them they had an important job to finish. The race officials were baffled. 3 experienced mushers, all found together 40 miles off trail, with no memory of how they got there. The dogs were fine, the people were fine, nothing made sense. I didn't try to explain. Who would believe me? The race finished without any more disappearances. Life went back to normal. Or as normal as life gets on the Iditarod trail. But I went back to Qikiqtagruq one more time, in the spring when the snow was melting. I brought my grandmother and some elders from the nearby villages. We held a ceremony, sang old songs, thanked Tommy and his team for their sacrifice, and we erected a marker. Nothing fancy, just a wooden post with a plaque that read, Tommy Nyokpuk Iditarod Musher, 1925. He kept running until he got home. My grandmother squeezed my hand as we stood there. You did good, Anna. You helped a lost spirit find peace. I almost didn't believe you. About the ghost mushers. And now? Now I know better. The trail remembers everything. Every musher who ran it, every dog who pulled a sled, every promise made in the snow, it all stays here, somehow. She nodded. That's why we tell the stories. To remember, to honor, to help guide the lost ones home. I stayed on as a ranger, still maintain the trail, still help racers, still love the wilderness that raised me. But I pay attention to the old stories now. I listen when elders talk about the spirits and the thin places and the things that live in the long darkness. And sometimes, on cold March nights when the Iditarod is running and conditions are just right, I hear dog teams in the distance. Running free, running fast, running home, but they're not recruiting anymore. They're not lost. They're just happy ghosts, doing what they loved, finally at peace after almost 100 years of trying. I leave offerings sometimes, tobacco at trail markers, songs in the quiet places. A thank you to Tommy and all the mushers who came before, who risked everything to keep their promises. Because that's what we do. We keep our promises. We help each other finish the race. Even if it takes 100 years. Even if we have to run through darkness and storm and impossible cold. We finish what we start. That's the musher way. That's the only way that matters. And now Tommy Nyokpuk knows that, too. Somewhere beyond the thin places, beyond the veil between living and dead, he's finally home with his wife Annie and his children Mary and Joseph. His race is over. But the trail goes on, and I'll be here, watching over it, making sure no one else gets lost in the darkness. That's my promise. And I always keep my promises. My name is Thomas Beringia, and I've spent 18 years watching the place where America almost touches Russia. People think the Bering Strait is just water, 60 miles of cold ocean between Alaska and Siberia. They're wrong. It's a doorway that should have stayed closed. I work as a marine resources specialist at Bering Landbridge National Preserve. Sounds fancy, but mostly I watch ice patterns, count walruses, and make sure Russian fishing boats don't cross into our waters. The job suits me. After 12 years in the Coast Guard, I like the quiet. My grandmother was Siberian. Yupik, her people, crossed this water in skin boats long before anyone drew lines on maps. She used to say the strait remembers everything that crosses it. November in the preserve means isolation. The tourist season ended months ago. Supply planes can't land when the weather turns. It's just me, my radio, and 200 miles of nothing between me and the nearest town. Most people would go crazy. I find it peaceful. Until the morning, I watched the seafloor rise. I was checking ice thickness near Cape Prince of Wales when the water started acting strange. The tide was coming in, but the water level kept dropping. Seals that should have been hunting suddenly burst from the ocean, barking in panic as they raced toward shore. Whales appeared on the horizon, not feeding, just moving fast away from something. Then the ocean floor cracked open. I've seen earthquakes before. This wasn't like that. The water didn't shake or splash, it just moved aside. Like something underneath was pushing up. Within hours, a strip of rocky ground appeared where there should have been 30 feet of water. By evening, it stretched almost halfway to Siberia. My radio crackled to life. Thomas, you seeing this? Dr. Sarah Chen's voice sounded excited. She led a geological survey team that had been studying climate change effects on the strait. We're getting readings that don't make sense. The seafloor just rose 40 feet in 6 hours. That's impossible. I'm looking right at it, I told her. There's dry land where my boat was anchored this morning. We're flying out tomorrow, she said. This could be the geological discovery of the century. A new island forming right in front of us. I should have told her not to come. But I was curious too. In all my grandmother's stories about the strait, she never mentioned anything like this. The old legends talked about bridges between worlds, but I'd never paid much attention. Just stories to scare kids. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind made different sounds now, like it was blowing through spaces that hadn't existed before. I stepped outside my station and looked toward the new land. Ice was forming fast in the cold air, connecting the fresh ground to both shores, a bridge made of rock and ice spanning the strait. Something was moving out there. Dark shapes against the white ice, too far away to see clearly. Probably just seals or polar bears checking out the new territory. Animals are always first to explore changes in their world, but seals don't walk upright. I grabbed my binoculars, but clouds had moved in. The shapes were gone, just ice and rock under a gray sky. I went back inside, telling myself I'd imagined things. 18 years in the Arctic can play tricks on your eyes. The next morning, Dr. Chen's team arrived in 2 helicopters. 5 people, Sarah, 2 graduate students, a photographer, and a mapping specialist. They were excited, talking fast about core samples and geological surveys. I helped them load their equipment onto sleds. "How stable is the ice connection?" Sarah asked. I tested it with my probe. Solid, should hold for weeks if the weather stays cold. I didn't mention the shapes I'd seen. Scientists like facts, not ghost stories. We crossed the bridge on foot, pulling sleds loaded with equipment. The new island was bigger than it, had looked from shore maybe 2 miles long and half a mile wide. The rock was dark and old-looking, covered with strange patterns that didn't look natural. "These formations," whispered Tom, one of the graduate students, "they look almost carved." He was right. What I'd taken for natural rock formations were too regular, too purposeful. Straight lines and perfect angles in stone that looked older than anything should be. The patterns reminded me of my grandmother's drawings. Symbols, she said, came from dreams about the time before ice. "We need to document everything," Sarah said, setting up her equipment. "This island could have been above water during the last ice age. We might be looking at evidence of early human migration." But humans didn't build things like this. The stone blocks were massive, some bigger than cars, fitted together without mortar or gaps. They formed walls and doorways leading down into the rock. The openings were dark and went deeper than our flashlights could reach. "I'm getting electromagnetic readings," called Janet, the mapping specialist. "There's something down there, something big." The wind picked up as afternoon turned to evening. We'd been working all day, taking photos and measurements. The excitement was wearing off, replaced by something else. The island felt wrong somehow, too quiet. Even the seabirds avoided it. "We should head back," I suggested. "Weather's turning." Sarah looked at her instruments. "Just a few more hours. These readings are incredible. It's like there's an entire complex underground." That's when we heard the sound. It came from below, a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the stone. Not mechanical. More like singing, if songs could be made of sound too deep for human voices. The grad student stopped talking. The photographer lowered his camera. "Geological activity," Sarah said, but her voice was uncertain. "The island's still settling." The humming got louder. Now it sounded like many voices, all singing the same impossible note. It made my teeth ache and my vision blur around the edges. The stone patterns on the ground seemed to shift and move in the fading light. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." Sarah started to argue, but the humming cut off suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It felt like the whole island was listening, waiting for something. We packed fast and crossed back to the mainland as darkness fell. Behind us, the bridge gleamed white under the stars. I kept looking back, expecting to see those dark shapes again. This time, I wasn't disappointed. They were there, tall figures, standing at the edge of the new island, perfectly still. Watching us leave. "Just rocks," Tom muttered, but his voice shook. "Rocks and shadows." I didn't tell him. Rocks don't have eyes. 3 days later, Sarah's team went missing. They'd crossed the bridge again that morning, excited about their underground discoveries. Sarah had called me on the radio around noon, her voice crackling with static. "Thomas, you need to see this. We found structures down here. Not natural formations, actual buildings, old ones." That was the last transmission. I waited until evening, then tried to raise them. Nothing. My radio worked fine. I could talk to the weather station in Nome, even picked up a fishing boat near Street Lawrence Island, but from the island, just silence. I should have called for help right then. Should have radioed the Coast Guard, told them I had missing persons. But the weather was turning ugly snow and wind that would ground any rescue aircraft for days. And something else held me back. A feeling that whatever was happening on that island, outside help wouldn't understand it. The next morning, I loaded my pack with cold weather gear and enough supplies for 2 days. The bridge was still solid, but the ice had changed. Instead of the rough, white surface from before, it was smooth and dark, almost black. When I stepped on it, my boots didn't slip at all, like the ice was gripping them. The island looked different too. The stone formations seemed taller, more complex. New passages had opened in the rock, leading deeper underground. And everywhere I looked, those strange carved symbols covered the stone. They seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I found the team's equipment scattered near the main entrance to the underground complex. Cameras, sample containers, Sarah's clipboard with half-finished notes. Everything looked carefully arranged, not dropped or abandoned, like someone had unpacked their gear and sorted it. The opening in the rock was wider now, big enough for me to walk through without ducking. My flashlight beam disappeared into darkness beyond. The air that flowed out was warm and carried a smell like old leather and metal. "Sarah," I called. My voice echoed strangely, like the tunnels went on forever. "Can you hear me?" Something answered from deep underground. Not words, more like the humming we'd heard before, but softer, almost welcoming. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the stone walls. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to get off this island and never return. But 5 people were down there somewhere, and I was the only one who knew where they'd gone. The tunnel sloped downward, carved from solid rock. The walls were covered with those moving symbols, and they gave off a faint light just enough to see by. My flashlight seemed dimmer down here, like the darkness was eating the light. After what felt like an hour of walking, I reached a vast underground chamber. My light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls, but I could see enough to know this wasn't natural. The space was too perfect, too deliberately shaped. And it wasn't empty. Structures filled the chamber, buildings made of the same. Dark stone, but sleeker than anything above ground. They looked ancient and impossibly advanced at the same time, like a city built by people who understood things we'd forgotten. That's where I found Sarah's team. They were standing in the center of the chamber, perfectly still, alive but wrong somehow. Their eyes were open but seeing nothing. When I called their names, they didn't respond. They just stood there, like they were waiting for something. "Sarah," I whispered, touching her shoulder. Her skin was warm, but she felt hollow, empty. She turned her head toward me then, and for a moment her eyes focused. "Thomas," she said in a voice that didn't sound like hers. "You shouldn't have come here. We need to leave, right now." She smiled, but it wasn't Sarah's smile. "We can't leave. We're part of it now. Part of the bridge." Before I could ask what she meant, the chamber filled with light. Not electric light, something older and stranger. The buildings around us hummed with energy, and I realized they weren't ruins at all. They were awake. That's when I saw them. The guardians stepped out of the shadows between the buildings, tall figures in clothes that might have been metal or might have been skin. Their faces were human-shaped but wrong, like someone had described humanity to an artist who'd never seen a person. They moved without sound, floating just above the stone floor. One of them approached me, and when it spoke, its voice was like the humming too deep, too full of harmonics. "You are the Watcher," it said. "The one who guards the passage." I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. "What did you do to them?" "We prepared them," the guardian replied. "As we prepare all who find the bridge, they will help us watch over the crossing." "What crossing?" The guardian gestured to the chamber around us. "This place exists in many dimensions. The bridge above is merely the anchor point. Below, the real pathways stretch between worlds. We are the keepers of those paths." My grandmother's stories came flooding back, legends about bridges between worlds, guardians who watched over passages between the lands of the living and the dead. I'd thought they were just stories. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Since the first crossing. Since your people walked from one world to this one, following herds across the ice. We watched them come. We watched them still." Another guardian approached, carrying something that looked like a crown made of the same dark metal as their clothes. "You will join them," it said. "You will help us watch." I ran. Behind me, the Guardians made no sound of pursuit, but I could feel them following. The tunnel back to the surface seemed longer now, twisting in directions that hadn't existed before. My flashlight flickered and died, but those symbols on the walls glowed brighter, showing me the way. I burst from the tunnel opening and stumbled across the bridge, not caring if the ice held my weight. Behind me, that impossible humming rose from the depths, not angry, just patient. Like they knew I'd be back. I made it to my station and barricaded the door, knowing it wouldn't help. If those things could build cities under the ocean floor, a wooden door wouldn't stop them. But I needed to think, needed to figure out what was really happening. My radio was full of static now, voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. When I finally got through to the weather station, the man on duty sounded confused. "Tom? Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for 3 days." 3 days. I'd only been gone for 6 hours. Outside, the bridge gleamed in the moonlight, and walking across it, I could see 5 figures heading toward the mainland. Sarah's team, moving with that same hollow purpose I'd seen in the chamber. They were coming to prepare more watchers for the crossing. The team reached my station just after midnight. I watched them through the window, 5 people I'd known for years, walking across the snow like they owned it. Their faces were calm, empty, happy, in a way that made my skin crawl. Sarah knocked on my door. 3 soft taps, perfectly spaced. "Thomas," she called. Her voice sounded normal now, friendly. "We know you're in there. We just want to talk." I pressed myself against the wall beside the window. Through the glass, I could see Tom and Janet setting up equipment around my station, not survey gear, things I didn't recognize. Devices that hummed with the same low frequency I'd heard in the underground chamber. "You can't hide forever," Sarah continued. "The bridge is growing stronger. Soon it won't need the ice to stay connected." She was right about the bridge. Through my radio antenna, I could see new stone rising from the water. The island was expanding, reaching toward both shores. In a few days, there would be a permanent land bridge between Alaska and Siberia. For the first time in thousands of years, you could walk from America to Asia, or something could walk from there to here. "We're not here to hurt you," Tom called out. His voice had that same empty cheerfulness. The Guardians explained everything. This is what the bridge was always meant for, a way to watch over both worlds. I knew I couldn't stay in the station. They had time and tools I didn't understand. Whatever those devices were doing, they were changing the air around the building. It felt thicker, harder to breathe. And something else, my thoughts were getting fuzzy around the edges. I grabbed my emergency pack and slipped out the back door. The snow muffled my footsteps, but I knew they'd find my tracks. I needed distance and shelter. The old weather monitoring post was 3 miles inland, abandoned for years, but the building might still be solid. I could reach it before dawn if I moved fast. Behind me, lights began to glow around my station as Sarah's team set up their equipment. The hike took 4 hours through knee-deep snow. By the time I reached the weather post, my legs were shaking and my hands were numb despite my gloves. But the building was intact. And more important, it was far enough from the bridge that my radio worked normally. I called the Coast Guard station in Nome. "This is Ranger Beringia at Bering Land Bridge Preserve," I said. "I have an emergency situation. Missing persons impossible. I'm not sure what to call it. I need immediate assistance." The duty officer sounded tired. "What's your situation, Tom? How do you explain interdimensional guardians and mind-controlled scientists? 5 members of a research team have gone missing. I believe they may be suffering from some kind of exposure-related psychosis. They're exhibiting dangerous behavior. Weather's been rough out there. Can you get them to shelter?" "Negative. They're not responding to commands and may be hostile. I need an evacuation team." There was a pause. "Tom, we've got reports of some kind of geological event in your area. New land formation. Is that related?" That's where it started. The team was investigating the formation when they went missing. "Okay, we'll get a helicopter to you as soon as the weather clears. Probably 2 days minimum. Can you maintain your position?" 2 days. I looked toward the bridge, now clearly visible as a dark line connecting the shores. Even at this distance, I could see lights moving across it. Not electric lights, something that pulsed like a heartbeat. "I'll do my best," I told him. But I knew 2 days would be too long. That afternoon, I saw them searching for me. Sarah's team spread out across the preserve, moving in a perfect line like they were connected by invisible wires. They didn't call my name or show any urgency. They just walked steadily through the snow, checking every possible hiding. Worse, they weren't alone anymore. Other figures moved with them, the guardians from the underground city. They glided over the snow without leaving tracks, their metal skin clothes gleaming in the weak sunlight. And behind them came something else. Something that made the air shimmer and bend around it, like heat waves on a summer day. I couldn't see it clearly, but I knew it was watching me. By evening, they'd surrounded the weather post. I could see them through the windows, Sarah's team and at least 6 guardians, arranged in a perfect circle around the building. They didn't try to break in or force their way inside. They just waited. As darkness fell, they began to hum. It started low, almost below hearing. But it grew stronger, and soon the whole building was vibrating with the sound. My teeth ached. My vision blurred. And worst of all, the humming made sense. I couldn't understand the words, but I knew what they meant. Come home. Join us. Become a watcher. I stuffed cotton in my ears and tried to block out the sound, but it wasn't really sound anymore. It was inside my head, in my bones. The humming spoke to something older than thought, the part of the brain that knew when to run and when to hide. Through the window, I watched Sarah approach the building. She placed her hands against the wall, and where she touched, frost spread across the glass in patterns that looked like the symbols from the underground city. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. Somehow I heard her perfectly, despite the cotton in my ears and the humming all around. "The Guardians aren't evil, Thomas. They're trying to save both worlds." "From what?" I called back. "From separation," came the reply, but it wasn't Sarah's voice anymore. It was the humming itself, shaped into words. "Your people crossed the bridge once, long ago. Now they've forgotten the crossing exists. They think their world is the only world." The frost patterns on the windows began to glow. The light was hypnotic, beautiful in a way that made me want to step outside and join the circle. To add my voice to the humming and become part of something larger than myself, I forced myself to look away from the windows and grabbed my emergency radio. If I couldn't call for help, maybe I could at least warn people about what was coming. But when I turned on the radio, other voices were already there. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all humming that same impossible song. They were coming from radio stations across Alaska, from ships in the Bering Sea, from weather monitoring posts and research stations throughout the Arctic. The bridge wasn't just growing physically, it was spreading through every form of communication, every connection between human minds. The Guardians were using our own technology to expand their influence. I turned off the radio and sat in the dark, listening to the humming grow louder outside. Through the windows, I could see more figures arriving, people I recognized from Nome and Kotzebue and other towns along the coast, all walking through the snow with that same empty purpose, all adding their voices to the song. Tomorrow, the Coast Guard helicopter would fly into this. The pilots would hear the humming through their headsets, see the lights of the bridge, and land to investigate, and then they'd join the watchers too. I had maybe 6 hours before sunrise. 6 hours to figure out how to stop something that had been growing for thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to bridge the gap between worlds. My grandmother's stories were the key. She'd known something, passed down through generations of her people. Not just legends about bridges between worlds, but instructions, warnings. I closed my eyes and tried to remember everything she'd told me about the watchers who guard the crossings. The memory came to me just before dawn. I was 8 years old, sitting by the fire while my grandmother carved bone fishing hooks. Outside, the wind howled across the Bering Strait, but inside was warm and safe. "Why do the spirits need watchers?" I'd asked her. She'd stopped carving and looked at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. "Because crossing between worlds is dangerous, grandson. Not just for the ones who cross, but for both worlds. The watchers make sure only the right things pass through. What happens if they let the wrong things cross?" Her knife slipped, and blood welled up on her finger. She sucked it clean and went back to carving. "Then the worlds bleed into each other, and both worlds die." Now, sitting in the abandoned weather post, while the humming grew stronger outside, I finally understood. The Guardians weren't trying to bridge our world with theirs, they were trying to stop something else from crossing. Something that had been pressing against the barriers between dimensions, looking for a way through. And humans, with our machines and our ignorance, had weakened those barriers. The seismic activity that created the island wasn't random. It was a response to dimensional stress, reality itself, cracking under pressure from something that wanted in. The Guardians had surfaced to reinforce their ancient watch, to recruit new sentries for a battle they'd been fighting since before recorded history. But they were losing. Through the window, I could see the bridge clearly in the pre-dawn light. It stretched from shore to shore now, no longer needing ice to support it. And at its center, something was wrong with the space above the stone. The air twisted and folded, showing glimpses of somewhere else, somewhere dark and hungry. That's when the real enemy revealed itself. The thing that came through the dimensional rift moved like liquid shadow. It had no fixed shape, but everywhere it touched, reality changed. Snow became sand, then glass, then nothing at all. Trees aged decades and seconds, then crumbled to dust. The air around it shimmered with heat that turned to Arctic cold, that turned to something beyond temperature. The Guardians and their human converts formed a defensive line around the rift. Their humming changed pitch, becoming urgent, desperate. Whatever they were trying to do, it wasn't working. The shadow thing was too strong, too alien for their ancient protections. I watched Sarah step forward, her hands raised toward the creature. Light poured from her fingers, the same glow as the symbols in the underground city. For a moment, the shadow paused. Then it swept over her like a wave. When it passed, Sarah was gone. Not dead gone, as if she'd never existed. The snow where she'd stood was perfectly smooth. No footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. The other watchers pressed closer together, their humming rising to a shriek that made the windows of the weather post crack. But I could see the fear in their movements now. They were guardians of the crossing, but they'd never faced anything like this. And then I remembered the rest of my grandmother's story. What if the watchers fail? I'd asked her. She'd put down her carving and taken my hands in hers. Then someone must close the crossing from the other side. Someone must choose to sacrifice the bridge to save both worlds. The bridge, the physical anchor that held the dimensional rift open. If it was destroyed, the passage between worlds would collapse. The shadow thing would be trapped wherever it came from. But destroying it would also eliminate the Guardian's ancient watch post, leaving the barriers unguarded. I looked at my pack, at the emergency supplies every ranger carried, including road flares and a small explosive charge for avalanche control. It might be enough. The shadow creature had consumed 3 more watchers by the time I reached the bridge. Moving carefully through the pre-dawn darkness, I'd circled around the main confrontation. The Guardians were too focused on their battle to notice one human creeping toward the stone causeway. Up close, the bridge hummed with dimensional energy. The symbols carved into its surface pulsed with light, showing the stress fractures in reality. I could feel the thing from beyond pressing against the barriers, hungry for a world it could reshape into something more to its liking. I placed the explosive charge at what looked like the bridge's central support point, then backed away, trailing the fuse wire. The shadow creature was winning its battle with the Guardians. In minutes, it would break free completely and begin transforming our reality into its own. But as I prepared to light the fuse, one of the Guardians appeared beside me. It was the same being I'd met in the underground chamber. But now I could see the exhaustion in its inhuman features. Thousands of years of holding the barriers, watching over crossings, protecting worlds that didn't know they needed protection. "You understand," it said. Not a question. "My grandmother's people knew," I replied. They remembered the old warnings. The Guardian nodded slowly. "If you destroy the bridge, we cannot rebuild it in time. The barriers will weaken elsewhere. Other crossings will become vulnerable." I looked toward the rift, where the shadow thing was methodically erasing the remaining watchers from existence. "And if I don't, then this world becomes like the others it has consumed. A place of constant change, where nothing can grow or live or die properly." Through the dimensional tier, I caught a glimpse of what lay beyond. Landscapes that shifted like water, cities that aged and crumbled and rebuilt themselves in endless loops, creatures that were sometimes human and sometimes not, trapped in forms that never stayed stable long enough to live real lives. The choice was no choice at all. I lit the fuse. The Guardian didn't try to stop me. Instead, it raised its hands and began to hum, not the recruiting song I'd heard before, but something sadder and more beautiful, a farewell to an ancient duty. The explosion shattered the bridge at its center. Stone blocks the size of cars tumbled into the frigid water, taking their carved symbols and dimensional anchors with them. The rift above began to collapse, its edges folding inward like a closing wound. The shadow creature turned toward the sound, and for a moment I saw something like surprise in its formless mass. Then the collapsing rift caught it, pulling it back toward whatever reality it had come from. Its shriek of rage and hunger followed it through the closing portal. The last thing I saw before the rift snapped shut was the Guardian, still humming its farewell song as dimensional forces tore it apart. It had chosen to anchor the closing from this side, ensuring the portal would seal completely. Then the bridge was gone, taking the island and the underground city with it. Where the crossing had stood, only dark water remained. The Coast Guard helicopter found me 3 hours later, sitting by the shore in the ruins of my weather station. The building had collapsed when the dimensional energies dissipated. Apparently, it had been more connected to the bridge than I'd realized. "What happened here?" Lieutenant Morrison asked, looking at the debris scattered across the preserve. I gave them the official story: geological instability, sudden subsidence of the temporary land formation. Missing research team presumed drowned when the structure collapsed. They found evidence to support most of it. The ocean floor showed signs of recent seismic activity. Pieces of scientific equipment washed up on both shores. They never found the bodies. Dr. Chen's team was listed as victims of a rare geological event. The brief land bridge that had connected Alaska to Siberia was noted in scientific journals as an interesting but unrepeatable phenomenon. The whole incident was filed away and forgotten within a year. But I remember standing in that underground city, seeing technology that predated human civilization. I remember the Guardians who had watched over dimensional crossings for millennia. I remember the thing that came through when the barriers weakened, hungry to reshape our world into something alien and unstable. Most of all, I remember my grandmother's words: "The Watchers make sure only the right things pass through." The bridge is gone, but the crossing points remain. They're scattered across the world, places where reality is thin, where other dimensions press close against our own. The Guardians maintained watch posts at dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Now those posts are abandoned. The explosion that sealed the Bering Strait rift sent shockwaves through the dimensional network. The old Watchers are gone, and new ones haven't been trained to replace them. I've been monitoring radio frequencies from across the Arctic. Strange reports are coming in, ships finding islands that aren't on any chart. Research stations losing contact for days, then resuming communication with no memory of the gap. Airline pilots reporting aurora patterns that move against the wind. The barriers between worlds are weakening again. I've requested transfer to a new position, Arctic Wildlife Specialist, with authority to monitor remote locations across northern Alaska and Canada. Officially, I'm tracking migration patterns and climate change effects. Unofficially, I'm looking for signs of new crossing points opening. When I find them, I'll be ready. My grandmother left me more than stories about the Watchers. She left me the knowledge of how to recognize when reality is becoming unstable, how to read the signs that something is pressing through from beyond. And most importantly, she taught me that sometimes the only way to protect something is to destroy the thing threatening it. The old Guardians are gone, but the need for Watchers remains. There are places where worlds touch, where things that shouldn't exist try to cross over into our reality. Someone has to stand guard at those crossings. Someone has to decide what gets through and what doesn't. Someone has to be willing to light the fuse when closing a door is the only way to save both sides. My name is Thomas Berengia, and I watch the places where worlds meet. The Strait remembers everything that crosses it, including the things we stop from crossing. And I remember my duty. Last week, fishermen near St. Lawrence Island reported seeing lights under the water. Geometric patterns that pulse with their own rhythm, too regular to be natural. The lights are moving north, toward the place where the bridge used to be. Something is testing the barriers again. I've packed my gear and requested a boat. Whatever's down there, whatever's pressing against the walls between worlds, it needs to know that the crossing is still guarded. The Watchers are gone, but the watch continues.